Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more. I'm going to bring you all individually, but we have a few people on from Really 007 Pods for an incredible discussion that doesn't yet have a title at the time of recording, but it is something to do with Batman and Bond, and maybe we'll have a name by the end of this video and how this discussion goes. But returning to the channel, we have John, we have Math, and introducing Harry as well. We're glad to get you on. I say this has been a long time coming. It's all coming back together. This has been like a really not happy accident. That makes it sound like I didn't want you on, but an idea formulated in my head recently about doing some James Bond stuff with Batman. And I thought, well, there's been some amazing discussions last year. A lot of you took time out to jump on our videos. Let us come on your channel as well. And I thought, you know what? I'd like to get them back on. And I know these guys were Batman fans because it has been discussed behind closed doors. I know that I can see the Dark Knight Rises poster in John's room as well on the wall. I remember that being a staple of it too. And there you go, just in the corner, it's still there. And yeah, so forgive me for anyone at home that thinks that they're going to include up. I don't know how this conversation is going to go. But before I do, I'm going to quickly go over the socials and where we can find everybody. So I want to know everyone's thoughts on Batman and Bond. That sounds like a crossover film yet to happen. If that film ever did happen, maybe comment who you'd want to see play both Batman and Bond. And obviously do that subscribe button, like, comment, all that really good stuff. Now, social media, the best way to find out what videos do go up is by getting us on there. Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook, letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy, and Radio 007 Pod. We will go over at the end some of the stuff they've got on the channel at the moment, which is definitely worth checking out. Their socials are on the bottom, and we have a link in the description to where you can listen to that as well on places such as Spotify. But do follow them. You know, lengthy discussions, the place to be. And I'm gonna. I said I'm gonna put you on the spot with a quick fire question. This might be a too easy a question, but I want to know everyone's favorite Batman film. Starting with John, we'll go clockwise.
It's babyish, but it's The Dark Knight. It's probably the best. Well, it is the best superhero film of all time. So there we go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, mine is The Dark Knight as well because I mean, I was so excited about it, and then when it came out and it did everything and more that it just blew my mind. But I also have a massive soft spot for Batman 1989. I love that film. I've probably watched that as much as any film I've ever seen. So just to be different to John, I'll say Batman 1989.
Harry?
Right. Try and think of something totally different. No. My favourite Batman film is The Dark Knight. For the aforementioned reasons, like John said, it's the best superhero movie that's probably ever made. In some ways, it's more than a superhero film. And like Matt said, I invested quite a lot of. I invested a lot in the hype and the anticipation, and it far surpassed all that. But I have to also say, like Math, we grew up on James Bond. We grew up on 1989 Batman and Batman Returns, and those, I watched them at a very young age, perhaps inappropriately, but they were a huge part of my childhood. Those two Batman films. So just like Bond throughout my life, the 1989 and obviously Returns, but yeah, The Dark Knight I think has to be the number one.
I mean, it's an unofficial full house. Dark Knight's mine as well, so there's no hiding away from this. But no, and this is it, right? Because we have a schedule as say, and I said to these guys before we hit live. This was in very late the night before recording, and to the point it is like almost in note form, and it sounds a lot deeper than what I want this video to be. So that makes it sound like I want this to be a terrible video. It won't be, but we've got some things we're kind of going to go over, and I want to talk about the concept of this video, the origin of this video, because we've been doing these building up to the Batman for a few weeks now. There was a video on 10 films to watch before. If you're curious about more about the director, the cast, some of the crew as well. And we had 2 tier list videos with Neil from Get Your Comic On. The first one was going over heroes and allies, the second one villains. And across these videos, I just keep going back to Bond. And it's not just because, we did all the films last year. They're on the channel. I've been interested in them again, and I've been still reading more. And obviously, in Oscar season, it's still in the limelight. And it's not because of that. It's because of all these other things. And these other things are what the core of this video is that I kind of want to. It's almost like expressing my thoughts out loud and hoping some Bond fans agree. I know that also sounds ridiculous at the exact same time, but there's a kind of concept to this, which is a really minor section. We're going to talk a little bit about the character or characters of Bond and Batman, even book/comic origins way before any of us were ever born. There are almost comparisons in there. We've got the iterations of each character. We've got a lot of Batman and a lot of James Bonds. No multiverse stuff yet, where we're all going to get them rock up in a film with each other. We'll save that for Disney. And then I think it's fair to say we're going to have probably a heavier talk on the Daniel Craig and Christian Bale era, post 9/11, obviously the filmmaking style, all that kind of stuff. And then just a chilled out chat, which I hope the whole thing is chilled on just the future of Bond and Batman, and obviously I'm going to ask you guys thoughts on the new one and all that kind of stuff. So it's safe to say I've never done a video like this before. So all of this might be me projecting my thoughts out loud. But just kickstarting, let's talk the character. I mean, there's not really much saying this. Obviously, one of them is the best spy in the world, right? The other one is a man that dresses up in a bat as his spare time. Both orphans, just to put it lightly. Not that that's like an easy thing. But I'm sort of curious, actually. I'm just going to ask you guys, before this video came out, have you ever, I know there are comparisons within films. I know that in your Skyfall review as well, it's spoken about quite a bit, but have you ever seen the actual comparisons done before? Have you ever sat there on those thoughts thinking, you know what, Bond and Batman, there is a lot of similarities. I'm quite curious to know, this is something anyone else ever thought quite deep about.
Yeah, I think for me, the two areas that I've always compared them is, especially the movie interpretations, is the inability to have a sustainable loving relationship. I think, especially, I'm trying to think which one. Well, I suppose Batman Returns, you can really see there's that real conflict in that film about not being able to, because of who he is. And clearly The Dark Knight has that as well. And Batman Begins. And then obviously Bond has never been able to settle and be happy as well. And I think that it's that aspect that that's part of their job. That is unfortunately just the cross they have to bear in that kind of role. The other thing as well is probably the villains. I think some of the villains I see, you have the larger than life, over the top villains in both Bond and in the Batman series, but you also have those kind of physical darker side of Bond and darker side of Batman villains as well. And I see quite a lot of similarities with that. They're the two main ones, I'd say.
Yeah, I can't say I've overly thought about the comparison with the characters as such. Certainly the films, that we'll come on to later, I've had a lot of thoughts about that. But in terms of the character, there's probably more similarities than I've thought of even coming into this tonight. But I think the fact that neither of them have superpowers might sound quite obvious, but particularly for Batman, he's a superhero without superpowers, so relies on gadgets and wits and strength and skill and knowledge and things like that. So there is that aspect, and obviously, he therefore has a Q. Not in all, So in some of the Batman films, there's just Alfred, who's almost a bit like an older Desmond Llewellyn Q type character, and then it's Lucius Fox who's more the sort of quartermaster. So, yeah, I mean, there are those elements, and like John said, the way that things kind of, Batman Returns isn't, it's not necessarily, it is a sequel, but it's not. Lots of things have almost, there's Vicky Vale isn't in it, and a new villain, new mission. And then some uncertainty, I think, amongst the general public as to, is this the same character? And what's is Batman Forever? Is that the same character? So those things have vaguely been in my mind over the years, but it isn't something I've overanalyzed, to be honest.
I've made the comparison before about them both being orphans, and yeah, that sort of leading to them being heroes but not superheroes, as was said, in terms of no superpowers. They've got that conviction where they that's what they want to do. Where I have thought about it in the past is that I think how Bruce Wayne becomes an orphan is more integral to him becoming Batman than James Bond being an orphan and him becoming a secret agent. I don't necessarily think that James Bond is a secret agent because of his childhood, whereas I think Bruce Wayne's childhood is absolutely essential to his mission and what he becomes. So though they're similar, I think there is a slight difference there. But other than that, yeah, I think kind of certainly recently, we might talk about ensemble casts, but yeah, and like Matt mentioned, having a Q figure, maybe an M figure, it's got those gadgets, and John's mentioned kind of the love, the conflict, not being able to hold down a relationship, and then of course you throw in those kind of staple things. You might say the staple of an action film, but like car chases, or and of course if he's in the Batwing or anything like that, and there are gadgets within the vehicles, that is something that is a similarity that even if you don't consciously recognize it, there's definitely a parallel going on there.
Yeah, and they're all really good points what everyone said, because even though I didn't even prep to ask you guys like that something on the spot, there's always going to be interpretations. I think with these two characters more than anything, we're here in 2022 now. We're celebrating the 60th anniversary of Bond films, not even the character creation. And technically the first Batman, well, not serial, but Batman 66 was obviously a film. And that's almost 60 years old. And both characters obviously, Batman the 40s, Bond 50s, they go back so far, but looking at them in like today's day and age, and I guess this is where a lot of it's going to come from, maybe the Bale and Craig stuff, is that with the way cinema's gone, it is very much that, without dissing Marvel, I love Marvel, let's do a cinematic universe. Let's combine 20, 30, 40 years together all into one. Let's do X, Y, and Z. And what I love about Bond, which is what I picked up on last year, James Bond is surviving on James Bond. We're not going to get a Q spin-off series. We're not going to get a Paloma spin-off series. We're not going to get an M origin story film. Yet for so many of these comic book things in the last few years, the Amazing Spider-Man 2, I know Garfield's got his credit recently. He was treated fairly. There was talk of an Aunt May spy film, like from decades before, and of course that was never going to get made. No one wants to watch an Aunt May film. It's about Spider-Man, and it's kind of how I feel that, to Bond's credit, in this modern age of make it a team, make it this, plan 6 films in advance. The James Bond films just absolutely still powerhouse. I mean, No Time to Die last year, with the COVID year, second highest grossing film behind Spider-Man in terms of blockbuster. I mean, I don't sound bad. I'm not including China's budgets, because their stats are very dodgy when you read into their numbers and their box offices. But obviously, Spider-Man, record breaking everything. But the numbers Bond made, I think back in September, I don't think, myself included, he thought, it would do well to make 600 mil. It hits 750, and they still have this attraction. And I think sometimes the simplicity of it being a film about James Bond makes it easier. And without getting into Spectre, because I'm sure we'll probably have to bring that up later on, that's a film that decided to give other characters storylines that don't need storylines, who have always been there to serve a purpose. And we want to see James Bond on screen. And I think with Batman, we're going to talk about some iterations shortly, but we got him in the DCEU, and we got an actor who deserves so much better. He didn't even get his own Batman film, and he's already out. And we sit here just like at the time that's going up a week before the new film comes out. Rob Pattinson, it's not going to be connected to anything. We're going back to the Nolan era of, here's a Batman film not connected to anything. And it's really fascinating seeing how cinema evolves and things go back towards systems and whatnot. But I'm just kind of curious, asking you guys as well, I think I speak for everyone when they say we don't want a Bond spin-off, but even talking about Amazon stuff really briefly, do you feel like Bond is safe long term? Obviously, we don't know what the future holds right now. We don't know who's going to be the new Bond. But do you feel that, knowing Amazon's evolved, we're a little bit safer with the character?
I think the character of Bond is safe. I do think that. And I think it's safe because of the legacy of the past 6 years. I think there is an inevitability that if somebody sees James Bond on the title, more than the average cinema goer will go to the cinemas to see James Bond. However, I think it's at a crossroads in terms of direction, but I don't think that's down to Amazon. I think that's down to the decisions that were made in the previous film. And I think that they have now got decisions to make of where do they go from here. Do they do another reboot? Do they pretend like nothing's happened? Do they go back in time and do Cold War spy thrillers? Do they go do the unforgivable and say that James Bond's a code name and a new James Bond agent comes out? We don't know what that will be, and I think that is quite worrying as a Bond fan to know where it is. So I think the commercial side of Bond will be fine. However, I'm not sure about the directions that are being taken. Regarding spin-offs, I'm all for them if they're on television. Television spin-offs, I've not got a major problem with it, to be honest. I don't care as long as it's not at the expense of a Bond film every 3 years. That's the priority for me. I want a Bond film every 3 years, and if I get that, you can put James Bond, The Mandalorian, and all the rest of it on. That's absolutely fine. It's just about let's get some consistency back in, and we're all good.
Yeah, similarly, yeah, I think Bond is safe, and Amazon securing the rights is a good thing in terms of they are that's I don't know. Whilst they were on their own, there's always that risk, and what was that film with? I was just going to say Barbara and Michael haven't had loads of output themselves with other things. I forgot that
Rhythm Section.
Rhythm Section. Yeah. So it is good, but I am a bit worried by, I've seen some discussion on Twitter, and this is John's point about direction. About one of the good things about No Time to Die is it Bond can do anything, as a Bond film can do anything or go anywhere now, and I prefer there to be limitations on what you do and none of the big cinematic universe or I don't know. So I would quite like. It's difficult because I like the fact that Barbara and Michael have a huge amount of say. And going over to Amazon, it's a bit of a risk, and what they might want, thinking about modern audiences prefer this. So I think that the future is pretty safe, but whether it's a future that I'll enjoy as much, I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that, like we said, there's a real junction with James Bond. I think it will last, but the direction and the creative decisions, and you do think about Star Wars and Disney. They tried a lot of regular films, and when Solo came out, it was like, well, no, we've had too much Star Wars, which I thought was actually unfair at the time.
Yeah.
So they sort of retreated to TV series, and now there's so many TV series that they're probably a bit afraid to come out with a film. And I wouldn't want that to happen with James Bond. It should always be that the films are the main event. And I wouldn't want there to be so many successful TV series that actually the character of James Bond became watered down, less and less significant. I actually think it's the central character of James Bond, which is the reason it's lasted so long, and that would be the reason it lasts so long in the future, based on James Bond. I think we could oversaturate with James Bond series, and it could actually bring the franchise to a premature end if you did that. I think if you kept them to the films 2 or 3 years, like John said, I think that should be what you aim for. And going on what Matt said about Matt likes there to be limitations, being able to do whatever you want is actually not necessarily the right thing, and I agree with that. And I actually think that's where Batman might have a strength, because you can't do whatever you want with Batman. There are rules, and I know sort of Nolan brought it into a real world, but there's still rules in terms of superhero, villain, and there's still something to work within. So I think maybe it will be interesting to see if Bond can survive in this new free world where he can die. And that's a really strange sentence I've just said. If he can survive where he can die, but yeah.
It's no, I quite like that. What is it as well about Star Wars? Really quickly, does anyone here not watch The Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett that does want to watch it that's not up to date? Because I'd love to drop a spoiler, but I'm not going to.
I've not watched Book of Boba Fett yet. I'm saving it. Please say nothing.
That's fine. I'm not going to say anything. all I'd say is that you made a really good point. You don't want your TV characters to overshadow your film characters, and that is a really important thing because let's say there was a Bond series one day. It was like, I don't know, here's a 004 and 3, and it's like some weird comedy duo. And then 007 pops up. That's a big one. It's like, whoa, James Bond's just turned up in this series, and it validifies it. But the last thing you want is your man, 003 and 4 to rock up in 007 and overshadow him. And that's where, Star Wars, I don't think Star Wars has had that, but I think The Mandalorian's got so big, to its credit, phenomenal series. Where, I mean, we don't have any Mando films that, this episode 9's done, this saga film's done. Imagine if they were still making 9, they'd be like, let's just chuck the Mandalorian's name in there and see, oh, look, it's a lovely tease. And you'd never want that with Bond. And it just poses a really interesting, and going back to the Batman discussion, that's fantastic as well, that, there are rules for Batman. And I think with Bond, because, contextually, the books were written in the 50s, Cold War, all that kind of stuff. What, not just Barbara, Michael, Cubby as well, everyone that's been involved in this franchise, probably I'd say the 70s onwards, has been able to always contextualize it, that you've got some characters and villains that, they might have been in a book 30, 40 years before, but they're going to do something new with them, and it's going to be appropriate for the timing they're in. I think GoldenEye's a perfect example of that as well. That's them going, welcome to the 90s. Granted, it's the mid-90s. That was that big message. And, Casino Royale is very much welcome to the whole post-9/11 Hollywood stuff. And, we've got 2 franchises that are going to get, well, one starts next week, the other one, hopefully, in the next few years, which is always a sad sign when we don't ever know.
No, we've got a bit of Shakespeare to get through yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think hopefully by November, I'd be shocked if there wasn't a director and a release date. No idea if we're going to get a Bond, but I think when they pencil in a release date sort of 3-4 years in advance, I'd be shocked if we didn't get that at least this year. But sort of heading into some of the Batman stuff, let's talk some like iterations of the characters. I've drawn up a list of each cinematic Batman, and I've put, this is my opinion, if you guys want to disagree or say someone else suits it, 100% go for it, but I've kind of put who I feel is the Bond that they are similar to, and this might seem ridiculous. We're going to kickstart in this, because this is primarily a Batman video. We're going to kickstart in the 60s Batman, the amazing Adam West. And, when I was thinking of these, thinking all the comparisons, what Bond was there that no matter how silly it got, there was charm to it, and it was impossible to dislike him. And personally, there's only one. And I like all the Bonds. I'm going to say this. I like all of them. But Roger Moore is essentially the Bond version of Batman 66. And I know that sounds silly to some. They might think, across the video, they're fuming. I've compared Adam West to Roger Moore's Bond. But, when even before you guys were talking about one of the actors that's been in one of the Bond films, and I won't steal the point out that you guys said, but looking back at that era, every adaptation is as wild as the others. And you mentioned, there are rules set up for Batman. Nolan is realism. Nolan is the modern day. And Adam West, he is that 60s, what do you call it, like pulp comic stuff, isn't it? That what was, a product of its time, swinging 60s, Hollywood, the hippie era, everything. You're not going to get a Tim Burton Batman that's going to work in that decade. And for what we got with Adam West, I've always thought of a Roger Moore type, because obviously with Roger Moore's Bond, he's the gentleman, he's suave, and he's got the one-liners, he's got the eyebrow raise and all that kind of fun stuff, but without sort of making it sound like too deep or whatnot. How does everyone feel about, just if you had to pair a Bond to a Batman, is that the right one?
I think in general, yes, but I think Roger can sometimes be tarred with a silly brush, which is a bit harsh, because he's incredibly diverse actually and rounded when you look at his resume. I think in terms of the actual film, I think Diamonds Are Forever is the nearest to Batman. In terms of its weirdness, its complete bizarreness and the stuff it does, the very campy nature of quite a lot of what's going on. A lot of the soundtrack, all that loungy stuff and saxophone stuff that you find in Vegas on Diamonds Are Forever is very inspired from the music that plays throughout the 60s Batman series. Obviously, Jill St. John, who was Tiffany Case, was in the first episode of Batman, this TV series. And I do know that Sean Connery, and hear me right, I am not going to claim that Sean Connery is the 60s Batman. I'm not saying that. But I do know that when he came back, he was very much like, I think we should take. He saw Mankiewicz's script and he's like, I'm with this. I can take this. This is how I see the character. So he fully embraced the silliness as well with it. And what you get with both Diamonds Are Forever and 1960s Batman are very enjoyable pieces that you can switch your brain off and just love. So I would go with that. If it's Roger Moore, I would say it's Roger Moore Moonraker. It's certainly not Roger Moore For Your Eyes Only. Yeah. But they're all knowing. They know what they're doing. They're in on the joke. You know, Adam West is incredibly self-aware. He knows what he's doing. He's got his tight grundies on, and he knows that he's taking the mickey, and that's exactly what Sean Connery, I believe, in Diamonds was doing. It's what I believe Roger was certainly doing in Moonraker. And yeah, so that's a long-winded way of saying yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more I can add to that particularly. I've seen a few episodes of the 1960s Batman series. I haven't seen the 66 film. I can understand the comparison to Roger's films in terms of that sort of enjoyment. You can stick it on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon and just sort of relax and just, you know, go away with it. But yeah, you know, Roger has quite a bit of diversity in his films that probably gets a bit overlooked. And, you know, considering it goes from 73 to 85, that's quite a big period. And also, I think when John Glenn came in, that sort of was a different era of Roger. Mm. You know, For Your Eyes Only's mainly serious with some sort of dafter bits, and then Octopus is the one that sort of balances those, and then perhaps By a View to a Kill, you know, many think he was kind of over the hill, but I still think it's almost that film, I don't know, that's again is silly, but not quite in the same way. I think Moonraker and maybe certain aspects of the three previous to that are perhaps what are most like the sort of silliness of 60s Batman, but the Diamonds Are Forever comparison is also a good one. So yeah, seems fair enough to me.
I can't really add much to either of what John and Matt have said, but I do want to take this opportunity for John to talk about his fear of the Joker in that incarnation. And is there any link there with Forever as well in terms of this fear?
Quite possibly, yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yes, we'll go with that one definitely, Harry.
I'm curious now, but I'm not going to quiz you about. Is it the mustache being painted over? Is that what does
no,
it?
No, it was the laugh. The laugh was very in your face, and actually, like, it's obviously a cultural thing because we took the Batman box set to Cornwall when we all went down as a family last year, and my son, he loves it, but when we took it down, my brothers both said, "Oh, the Joker is quite scary," and this impressionable 4-year-old is now absolutely outright refusing to watch the Joker in that, just because of what they said. So all I'm saying is I wasn't the only one who was scared for it. Maybe it was my mum who was scared and who passed it on to me, David and Richard, and we've inadvertently passed it on to my son.
In fact, I think I did find it scary. Sorry, just to I think I remember seeing as a child there was one episode of the Batman TV series I saw, and they went into this museum and there was a bust of someone famous, and Batman's like, "I'm sure I saw that move," or something like that, and then the Joker appears from behind it. It was quite scary. And my mate Ben had a birthday party which was Batman themed, and I remember they said like, "Oh, the Joker's hidden something." I was like, "Oh no!" I was like terrified.
I think with these as well. I don't know. Are there any Rocky fans here? I know it's quite a random one, but I remember the first ever time I watched Rocky, and I was like, "Is that the Penguin?"
Yeah,
And I was like, and every single time, and I love Rocky so much. Whenever I watch, I was like, it's the Penguin training Rocky's son. I think because I grew up, with that Batman 60s, so we had the old VHS, and when they did drop it on Blu-ray, I was like, I've got to buy the whole series just for nostalgia's sake and everything. And I was like, oh wow, like it's Burgess Meredith, and I know it's really unfair to only talk about maybe 2 films he was in, but when you've had such an attachment to a childhood of certain characters and what you remember, it's those kind of things. And sort of talking 60s Batman, because it's fun getting everyone's opinions on the Roger Moore stuff, because I know you will know I don't like Thorazone. I'm not going to go on about that, but I know it has a lot of fans, and I do keep saying I will eventually give it another go. When that is, I do not know yet. I'm not going to lie, but I really want to talk about Batman '89. So this was the tough one. Like, again, this is only me. Again, it's like midnight or whatever time the schedule's being done. I was like, there's not really been a Bond like Michael Keaton. But when you think of Michael Keaton, I mean, again, because other people know this, but I haven't told you. So the first, I grew up with Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. We had a little DVD box set when I was a kid. The old original DVDs with the cardboards, and you have to open the plastic tabs when DVDs were new. Do you remember them? And it was amazing. And we had the other 2 Batman films, and my parents weren't too strict with films, but I used to look at the back sleeve of Batman '89, and I was like, I don't like this guy. I didn't know it was the Joker, because it was like a really weird photo of him, like looking up. I was like, this guy creeps out. I'm never going to watch this. So I literally grew up on Forever and Batman and Robin, and then I saw The Dark Knight, and I was 12 when The Dark Knight came out. I just turned 12. And that film, I'm not going to do the waffle life-changing story. Obviously, that's why I did set up to do film stuff. And after that, I went back. I watched Begins. I watched Batman '89. I watched Returns, and got to see all of it. And I've never had the connection to '89 so many people do, and I find it really fascinating because to some people, Michael Keaton will always be their Batman, and I absolutely love this discussion, right? And it's when people say Michael Keaton is my Batman. How often does a James Bond fan say XYZ is my James Bond? When someone's got an attachment to a Bond, everyone's got their Bond, whether it's the first one they saw, the one they enjoy the most. I feel that everyone has an attachment. So I always say Brosnan. Brosnan is my Bond, and he still is. Maybe one day, maybe there will be a multiverse and he'll rock up. He still looks in fantastic shape. And I've put Sean Connery as Tim Burton's Batman, but not out of quality. I do think Connery is the benchmark with Bonds, and I think he always will be. But they're both I know it's unfair on Adam West, but Keaton is the first Batman as far as I see it, in the same way that Sean Connery is the first James Bond. I feel that's where I am with that. But I know a couple of you mentioned Batman, so I'm just curious to know, who would you if you can remember growing up with it at the time. As I said, I was very late to this film, and I don't have the attachment, which is a shame. A lot of us do, but I'm quite curious to know your thoughts on who maybe who you think is closer to Michael Keaton's Batman.
I'm very similar to you, George, that I didn't grow up on Batman either. I grew up on 60s Batman, and then Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. So the first time I watched the 1989 Batman was about 12, maybe maybe a bit older, 15, something like that. I wasn't that young. So I don't have the biggest affiliation with it. My opinion, I think it's a good film. I think Nicholson does great. My opinion of Keaton is that he's the best Bruce Wayne, but he's not necessarily the best Batman. That's my opinion on it. I think he plays a great Bruce Wayne. But I don't really. I feel like I should pass this on to Matt and Harry, because they grew up with it and they love it. Go on.
Well, having older brothers, I saw this film when I was probably too young. I mean, it's 15 now. I don't know whether it was an R or whether it was a PG-13 in America. I can't remember, because it's not. It doesn't feel like a. I think that doesn't seem. Anyway, it's still quite grown up and quite scary. And I remember, I'm sure it was on. We had a Christmas recording of it, and BBC One used to have the ident or whatever you call it before the show or the film is on. It used to have a circle with the number 1 in it, but for this, it had the Batman logo, and it was like the network premiere of it that we had recorded. So I watched it so much as a kid, and therefore in many ways, Michael Keaton is my Batman. And even though I'm such a big fan of the Dark Knight trilogy, and I absolutely love Christian Bale, and I think he's brilliant as sort of both. And when you go on a journey with him through that trilogy, and you feel like you do know him and you know what he stands for and everything. The thing about Michael Keaton's Batman is he's sort of more hidden. He's you don't quite know necessarily where you are with him, and he is really good as Bruce Wayne, because you can see there's that darkness to him, and he doesn't open up that much, but then he does. He tries and everything, and it doesn't always happen. But I think it's good as well because, again, I absolutely love Batman Begins, and that sets up, the brilliant trilogy by doing the origin story, which Christopher Nolan really, thought they've never done that before. Let's do that. But I think it works well for Michael Keaton's Batman and Bruce Wayne because we haven't seen what he did to become that. He's Batman already for a few weeks or months by the time the action of Batman 1989 starts. So in many ways, he is my Batman, and perhaps not quite in the same way as Sean Connery. Sean Connery, the original Bond, and to whom all others will always be compared. When like Daniel Craig or a new Bond, whenever that happens, it won't be like, how do they compare to Roger Moore? How do they compare to, Timothy Dalton? Or it'll be well, Sean is the one that you compare it to. I don't think there's that to the same extent with Michael Keaton, but I still think it's a pretty big deal, that film coming out, one of the first blockbuster superhero films. And that really set a trend. So I think for many, he is their Batman, but not quite to the same level that Sean Connery is, there or the Bond.
Yeah, I find it quite difficult anyway to say who my James Bond is and who my Batman is. Sort of, like Matt said, we grew up with Batman, and as people probably able to tell, we grew up with James Bond. With James Bond, there were lots of different James Bonds. When we were children, you were flicking one day from Moore to Connery. Yeah. But with Batman, obviously, there was only 2 Keaton films. There's only 2 compared to Connery, who was obviously more. There's only 2 with Keaton. And also as a child, I don't know whether when you're watching these films as a child, whether you're really thinking about the central character too much. You're more thinking about the actual motion picture, the action, the adventure. So it's difficult for me to say if I attached myself to Michael Keaton, but without a doubt, he does exactly what Matt says in terms of an incredible kind of mystique where there's a lot going on underneath the surface. But what Michael Keaton manages to do incredibly well is not hammer that point, not overdo it. He's not, walking around the room puzzling, getting cross with Alfred and, we've got some kind of anger management problem or anything like that. On the face of things, he is so charming, so polite, so peaceful, actually. Like Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne is one of the most peaceful characters on film. He's, he's lovely with everyone, but and it's not in total contrast to him being, Batman at night. You can always tell that there's something underneath. And I think there is a comparison to be made there with Sean Connery in terms of Sean Connery is just incredibly charming, so cool, so calm, and so casual, so pleasant in the room. When you see Sean Connery in an action scene, when he's on a mission, he will properly go to town on an enemy, and it's the same with Michael Keaton. Really nice on the surface, but there's something where they can cause serious damage underneath. I think there's definitely that comparison. But like Matt said, I don't think Michael Keaton quite holds that same regard that people will always herald back to Sean Connery. I don't think people will herald back to Michael Keaton as much, probably because he only, he had 2 films, but is he going to have a third one soon or something as well? I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's back later this year, John. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think one thing that as well, like people don't always go back compared to Keaton is that there'd at least been television interpretations of Batman previously as well. Connery was the first interpretation. No, he's not, is he? But he's the first cinematic interpretation on a big screen for a feature-length film, as opposed to a skit or the previous Barry Norman Casino Royale before the Stop Getting Bond Wrong Brigade have a go at me. Go on, carry on.
No, it's really interesting hearing this because it is all about the attachment, and I think certainly the age you are attached to these characters, and we'll speak about it towards the end. But I think you mentioned, there wasn't multiple Batmen. What would you call it? The Batmen? I don't know.
Yeah.
There wasn't loads of them. It was West or this, and I think maybe with me, certainly with Bond and Batman, not sort of preaching the youngest in the room type thing, but I was spoiled for choice. I can say I got Brosnan. That's the fifth James Bond. And Batman wise, getting to the Dark Knight, there's been 5 Batman at that point. And it's really interesting seeing, here we are 2022. Although Michael Keaton is coming back this year, believe it or not, and looks like he's here to stay based off what they've been doing with other DC projects, which is even more mind-boggling. We're in this world where we're able to go back, like whilst having something new. And this one's a stretch. I'm not going to say Pierce Brosnan's like Joel Schumacher's Batman. This is really unfair, but the 90s Batman films, I mean, I know that Returns technically is. I'm talking the Joel Schumacher, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. I think Pierce Brosnan would have made a bloody fantastic Batman in these films. I couldn't stop that chin. I couldn't stop thinking about it yesterday. I was like, Pierce Brosnan like fighting Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd take it. Like, he'd have so much fun doing it, and I can't get this image out of my head of Pierce Brosnan doing those 90s Batman films now. But where I've kind of gone, I just put it as it's the 90s. I think when you were reinventing a character, and I wouldn't even say Bond was reinvented per se with GoldenEye. It was more the everything but Bond. The world had modernized, and as Em says, Bond is the fossil in the room, and that amazing speech. And it's really interesting. And obviously, then we get Batman Forever, and it's like, it's kind of the same character, but the world wasn't involved in sequels and continuity at that point in time. I think that's fair to say, right? No one really went into Batman Forever and thought, wow, this Harvey Dent doesn't look a lot like Lando Calrissian. I don't think that was a discussion point at the time. And, Warner Brothers told them to make kids' films. And listen, I don't think GoldenEye is a kids' film. Neither is Tomorrow Never Dies. But the young audience, I don't want to say my generation. I was far too young to be watching Bond, given the discussions I've had with everybody at the age I was finding that out. We had PlayStation games. We had the gaming generation was coming through with the PS2 stuff, and Batman was getting all of it. An animated series that kids were watching as well, which is ironically darker than those films. And just the whole 90s Batman. I keep saying 90s, the mid 90s onwards. I adore Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. I think they are so pathetically hated on. And when the function of a film is to be a kid's film, I don't like this. Let's attack it with an adult conscience, because you can, and you're entitled to, but this isn't made for an adult or for a kid. And I don't think Bond has had that ever. I will say that I wouldn't want Bond to, do a James Bond Jr. I know that was an animated series. But again, not just to stretch with the whole Brosnan thing, but I think comparing that mid-90s Batman era, and I'm just curious actually to know everyone's thoughts on those, because the comic book villains were essentially larger than life. They were cartoons. You had Poison Ivy, Schwarzenegger, you had Two-Face, you had Jim Carrey's Riddler, and then meanwhile with Brosnan's not Batman era, Brosnan's Bond era, yes, you've got Alex Trevelyan, but at the same time you've got Xenia Onatopp. Obviously, that's definitely not for kids. But in terms of how out there the villain is, and Elliot Carver, thespian over the top, and I love Die Another Day. How ridiculous is Die Another Day as far as the villain goes, that he's actually become someone new. I just want to run it by. Like, again, it's probably clutching at straws for someone viewing at home, but where do you all stand with the 90s Batman? And is there any crossing over with Bond?
To me, I put them in the same era because that's what I grew up with, and I think we were spoiled. I always compare Batman Forever to The World Is Not Enough, actually, and I think the reason why I do that is because they were both. It was the first Batman I saw on screen. It was the first Bond I saw on screen. Yeah. I think both get tarred. World Is Not Enough having a bit of a renaissance, and rightly so, but I think they both get tarred with silly script choices or silly dialogue. But actually, there's a lot of ambition in Batman Forever. There's a lot to love in it. just like there is in World Is Not Enough. And then obviously there's the obvious comparison between Batman, Robin, and Die Another Day, and I actually think that's fair, and I get it, and I would never be surprised if Purvis and Wade were actually ghost writers on Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. Because there's some similarities. I mean, and we talk about them being kids' films, but flipping Nora, there is some Die Another Day cringeworthy lines in Batman and Robin. I mean, I'll help you grab your rocks. I mean, that one, as a kid, I knew what that was about. I was like, that's horrendous. And you got the bat nipples, and we didn't see Halle Berry's nipples in that bikini, but we weren't far off, and there was always comparisons with that stuff in that. And I think that's another aspect. I don't mean facetious there, but highly sexualized women is a very, very significant part in both the later all Brosnan films, forget that, all Brosnan films, and those 90s action film. I mean, Xenia on the top, obviously, and Poison Ivy, actually, if I'm being honest, they are both sexual villains. That's the way they go, and they use their sexuality as their weapon. I'm really trying to keep this.
No, please continue, John. I'm loving it, absolutely loving it.
I see where you're coming from as well, though, and it's. I mean, I'm a bit younger, right? Sorry, but the 90s. Looking back now, this is like the era where you're getting stuff like American Pirates. The 80s age group, the 80s is that iconic decade. They're sort of growing up in the 90s, right? They're in their teens, they're young adults, and the 90s is a really fascinating decade to look at because it starts and ends as wild as any decade you could put before it. And I think it's when you look at cinema, in context, look at Poison Ivy. I was amazed that I know that Sam Rogers, who's a big fan of your channel as well, Batman Robin's his favorite Batman film, and I absolutely love it when we spoke about this. But I always think of Poison Ivy as well, that a lot of people say she's like a drag queen, and there's a kid you don't know that. And I think I was watching a couple of years, like, wow, like they are drag costumes. I've seen so many interesting takes over the last few years from people. And it's really interesting seeing where different people from different backgrounds interpret these characters. I mean, even when you look at modern day stuff, like Bane and that couldn't be any more. I mean, Bane's dressed up as a gorilla dancing on a seductive stage. Like, then you look at Tom Hardy's Bane, like snapping people's necks, and you're like, it really was a wild time.
The Bane in the Batman and Robin film is offensive to the comics, to the legacy of that character. It really is, unfortunately. I mean, Bane. Let's just press his button. But Bane. But having said that, I remember watching that film about 5 years ago with a friend, and we both said it's probably the worst film we've ever watched, but it's up there with The Room, but like The Room, it's probably in my top 100 films of all time, because in terms of it's pure entertainment for the complete wrong reasons, but it's pure entertainment from start to finish. I really like it. You've also got the U2 link on Batman Forever and GoldenEye as well. They're all over that, and that idea of dual songs in films it was a 90s Bond trait as well, and please bring that back. Yeah, go on. There's loads of it.
Yeah, well, the 90s was such an amazing era, and I'd grown up as a massive Bond fan and as a massive Batman fan, but I'd never been able to see. I couldn't remember new film. I could vaguely remember Batman Returns coming out when I was about 6 or 7, but I was way too young to go and watch them at the cinema. And then 1995 comes along, and it's not the era of the internet where you can keep up to date with, someone's been rumored to be seen on set. And anyway, in those days, they didn't seem to be bothered about things like that as much, in terms of, oh, we have to keep everything absolutely top secret and this, that, and the other. So you got your trailer, you got a poster. So I like the GoldenEye poster. But I also remember seeing the Batman Forever poster when we were at the cinema, and I'd heard rumors of, I knew I'd read in some magazine, I can't remember, it was Empire or something, that it wasn't Michael Keaton anymore, it was Val Kilmer. And the rumors that, Jim Carrey, who was, the mid 90s were just his domain.
He owned it.
And then seeing he'd be the Riddler. And then on this poster, I saw a picture of Robin and Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. Like, whoa. This, and Nicole Kidman was on there as well, wasn't she, John? And so that was amazing. So 1995, I was able to see at the cinema. I shouldn't have been able to see GoldenEye, but I snuck in. And then we were up in the Lake District on holiday, and when that came out in July, I think, was it July? Yeah, 95. We went. Mum and Dad took me, Tom, and Harry. Went to watch it, and then went for fish and chips afterwards. Do you remember that, Harry?
I do, yeah.
It was just that was, what fond memories, and the two songs as well. I think they're amongst the best sort of double bill of two songs, "Kiss from a Rose" as well as "Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kill Me," and that was brilliant. So I did it. I enjoyed it and everything. By the time Batman Robin came around, again, the first thing I saw was a poster with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, who's he supposed to be? Oh, I just I did get excited, and I remember we did it. I enjoyed it when we went to watch it, and then for my mate, I mentioned him again. I don't know why. My mate Ben. It was his birthday in 1997, his 12th birthday. So no, 13th. But I basically forced him to have his birthday party, invite everyone to Tomorrow Never Dies on the opening night. So we did that. But I bought him Batman and Robin on video for a birthday gift. So there's a lot of intertwined things there, particularly about my experience of going to watch them.
Yeah, it was a massive part of our childhood, and like both John and Matt have mentioned, your first cinema experience. I'm the same as John. It was The World Is Not Enough for Me and Batman Forever, and that's really, really significant. And you've talked about video games as well, George. The other thing to mention, actually, which was quite important for me around the year of Batman Forever, was the toys. They came out with some wonderful Batmobile that you could light up. Great action figures, great sets, and I got quite a lot of them, and I really, really got into it in that respect. And that extended to Batman and Robin as well. It's a really good era of toys, Bond, being able to play the films that you're seeing on the TV. And I think, I don't know about Pierce Brosnan necessarily comparisons. I can see the Die Another Day thing. That's made me laugh. But I think just where the differences are with pointed out another difference perhaps between Bond and Batman that I hadn't quite realised, that obviously with Bond, certainly post Fleming era, you can keep creating new villains that are original. With the Batman series, you're not really able to keep creating villains, so you've got quite a limited set of films.
Fair.
Because of the villains, you might be able to stretch a Batman franchise to 7 or 8 films at the most. But I don't think I felt these concerns at the time, but I think perhaps part of the problem with Batman Forever and Batman Robin is, you've got these limited villains, and you've thrown them all into 2 films, so that neither of them. I don't know. Like, obviously, 1989 Batman, you get the Joker, and that's a real masterclass of a villain. And then Danny DeVito's Penguin is excellent, and I think it's the right balance to put Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman in there and then nothing more. But when it comes to Batman Forever and Batman Robin, that's like having all that'd be the equivalent of Bond, having Blofeld and then all of Spectre plus some other villains, playing bit parts, and I think perhaps that's one of the strengths of Bond, in that it can stretch and you can spread out, you can take your time, you can create new villains, and obviously as we look at the new Batman coming out, we're seeing villains we've seen before. It's not just that we're seeing reincarnations of Batman, we're seeing reincarnations of villains, and that's not something you see with Bond.
No, that's a really good point, and I think no one would want to see a Goldfinger done differently, right? You wouldn't want to see someone do a new and you get villains that are similar, plot, story, certain things.
And we thought Safin might be Dr. No or something. So
yes, which was absolutely, because that was interesting in the whole Poison Garden as well. The hands, and obviously, it's because they did a Blofeld as well, which is obviously the big one. And with that Batman stuff, it's really interesting getting these viewpoints on that, actually, because I couldn't have drawn up half of those. But the toys is amazing. I'm glad you mentioned them, because I think even Joel Schumacher, who directed them, said Warner Brothers told me to make things that can become toys, and that is a fundamental part of filmmaking. I think certainly in the 90s day, and with all those 90s ones, because I think there's a lot of, as ridiculous as they are, there's so much love for those films, and maybe they're harmless, right? I mean, there's nothing preposterous. There's no abuse. I mean, you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's not, ripping people's limbs out of place. He's making puns non-stop. He's wearing, even though he's a man cold, he's wearing slippers, even though he's kind of integral that he's always cold, not warm. So there are things like that which are just amazing, and I don't know,
visually amazing though as well.
Yeah, exactly, and they stand out, and you remember them.
So colourful, colourful, aren't they? Yeah,
they are.
The Two-Face sets, where every set is basically split in half of the light. I think you've got Reese, not Reese Witherspoon, the other one from Charlie's Angels,
Drew Barrymore.
You've got all these people popping up, and I just love what they did with them. Even though the quality's not the best, I think they work as kids' films, and it should be talking about Nolan's Batman and Craig, but I'm going to skip these because that's going to be the real chunky discussion.
Yeah.
You're going to love this. Let's talk a little bit about Timothy Dalton's Bond. And I'm going to compare it to Ben Affleck's Batman. And this is a wild comparison, right? Because at least Timothy Dalton got 2 films that he actually got to be James Bond in a James Bond film. Ben Affleck didn't get a solo Batman film. And, he was a bit part player in Justice League, bit part co-titling in Batman versus Superman. And this is kind of
Suicide Squad, wasn't he? Was he a little bit in Suicide Squad?
Yes, he was. Cameo in Suicide Squad. He's gonna rock up in Flash this year as well. So we're getting 2 Batmen in the same film minimum. Where I'm kind of approaching from with this, Roger Moore, obviously his legacy as Bond is arguably, I still think Connery has in terms of a legacy, a better legacy. But Moore and Connery are the 2, right? It was always, I know I wasn't around, but it was always, who do you like, Connery or Moore? And that's how it was for so long. And how do you follow up Roger Moore? You get Timothy Dalton, and the world wasn't ready for him. And it's as simple as that. I know we discussed that on the Living Daylights video. I think we had Spies on for License to Kill. Even 1989, brilliant comparison. One of the reasons License to Kill bombed at the box office was because of Batman's success. Batman was a gigantic hit at the time, and Bond had done a rated R thing, which they'd never done before, and they've definitely not done since. And it's really interesting reading some of those things. But Timothy Dalton, aside from the films, he'd come off the back of arguably one of the most successful Bonds. Ben Affleck comes off the back of Christian Bale's Batman. And Bale's legacy, we'll get into that in a bit, but the Dark Knight trilogy is changed cinema, right? I think that's not an understatement anymore. Every film was trying to be like the Dark Knight, and we get to discuss a Bond film that also did that in a short while. They were, back when it was real hard to get $1 billion grossing box office, it got 2 out of 3 in a franchise. It reinvigorated everything, got the whole Nolan world, but Ben Affleck's Batman was cast 2 years after Dark Knight Rises finished, and maybe this is more of a comparison to Bond, which we don't have an answer for yet. It was a definitive end of that character. This is the end of this take of Batman's story. He's settled down at the cafe with Michael Caine and Catwoman with the nod. Obviously, Daniel Craig's Bond definitely didn't get that ending. Instead, he obviously got burnt smithereens and with poor Doodoo. And this is where I kind of feel like with the Batfleck stuff, Ben Affleck as an actor is a phenomenal actor, director as well. Argo, incredible film. And Timothy Dalton is a veteran of the stage. He's been in many TV shows. He's always done theatre work, and you could view him as not a traditional Bond actor in the same way I don't think Affleck's a traditional Batman. But I just feel that with both of these two, you look back and there's some good memories for sure. More so with Timothy Dalton, because again, he got to actually lead a film. But these two deserve so much better for their characters, at least for Dalton to round off a trilogy, and at least for Affleck to actually get his own film. I kind of want to know if anyone has seen them, because I know that not everyone does like the Zack Snyder films, which is, I'm also in agreement with a lot of the issues of these films. I'm curious to know your thoughts on these two, because very different eras, but also people would say this Batman was too violent, was that Bond too violent? So it's an interesting one.
So I'm going to take a slightly different angle with this one, okay? So I think Ben Affleck's a fantastic actor in some of my favourite films of all time. Anyone who pretty much his first film that they've ever been in is Dazed and Confused, you settle for life, brilliant actor, great director. I don't mind his interpretation of Batman. I despise Batman versus Superman with everything within me. I hate that film so much. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And it to the point that it put me off DC films. I've never seen Justice League. I've never seen anything, pretty much hardly anything since, because I really hated it. And why I hated it was, to me, it didn't try anything new from what the Dark Knight trilogy did. It just tried making it even more depressing. That was my interpretation, and I see the similarities with the Craig era. How do you make it darker? You just make it more depressing. So I didn't see like a stark contrast in the character. However, I do also want to hold back and say, but I don't think that's Ben Affleck's problem. I think it was more Zack Snyder's style. I'm going to argue, here we go, that Timothy Dalton and Val Kilmer are the same. And this is why I don't think the world was ready for Val Kilmer as Batman. I think Val Kilmer is actually a pretty darn good Batman, with his understated approach. I heard you can read stuff that there was problems on set and all the rest of it. But why I'm saying there's a difference between Timothy Dalton and Kilmer is because where the contrast was from Roger Moore to Timothy Dalton, you've got the vice versa contrast between Michael Keaton to Val Kilmer. It's a different interpretation that people probably weren't used to. And it's only with retrospect that you can look back and go, oh, actually, I see that they're trying to do something different, and now I appreciate it. I don't expect anyone to agree with that, but that is my... I put Dalton and Kilmer together rather than Dalton and Batfleck.
Very interesting, John. So I think Ben Affleck, as is often the case, people were against his casting at the time. As you said, George, it was quite soon, and probably too soon for my liking, because I'm such a big Dark Knight trilogy fan. Too soon after, on the back of The Dark Knight Rises, and also, it's been touted for years. Batman versus Superman. It was a popular comic, and then there were previous film adaptations that they wanted to do, and there'd been Man of Steel, which I didn't mind, pretty decent, but I don't know, I wasn't crazy about it, but I thought, yeah, Ben Affleck, I can see that, and I don't mind him in it. I think I struggle in general with the concept that he's so dead, set on killing Superman. But I think one of my main problems, and this is why I'm quite pleased, I it would have been good to see Ben Affleck as a Batman in his own Batman film / films. But one of my problems is I think it would have to be outside of that universe, because that universe has got like Superman, it's got alien, it's got superpowers and aliens and everything. And I don't particularly like seeing Batman in that context. Batman fighting, that big thing at the end with the kryptonite spear and stuff.
Yeah.
Not Abomination.
Doomsday.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd rather have seen him if he was going to do a Batman film, in a film like Matt Reeves's that we're going to get. And I'm pleased that they're going back to that idea that they're set fairly much in the real world. Now, Batman Forever, in fact, the whole Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin were in a they're in more fantastical world, and the creation of the villains was quite fantastical, and the idea of Mr. Freeze or Two-Face and stuff, although that's maybe not the best one because there is one in the Dark Knight trilogy, but you know what I mean, a penguin, those sorts of things. But there was still, you couldn't have anyone flying, or you couldn't have, I don't know, like I say, an alien. So I think that hamstrung his era a little bit. But and I think he was pretty good, and I thought he was good at both. But I guess we'll never know. And I'm quite disappointed about this. It'll be good to see him, and great to see Keaton back in The Flash and whatever. And then I've seen it in Batgirl, but I don't know what that is. But I'd rather just have seen them in their own films, or what I would have liked to have seen is a Batman Beyond film adaptation where they're a grown-up Batman and training a younger one. But anyway, so sorry, what were you saying? Timothy Dalton, yeah. So in some ways, it is a bit a case of what might have been. We didn't get to see more, but I feel that so much more strongly about Timothy Dalton. 91 and 93, maybe if it was just even one or third film, that really does get to me. Ben Affleck, I'll get over it.
There was Ben Affleck was going to follow this up with his own film, wasn't he? With the Batman, and there was test screening for, was Deadshot the villain, and what was it?
So
Deathstroke.
It's quite sad to see what was going to happen. I mean, I'm convinced to this day Ben Affleck only took on the Batman role to direct his own Batman film, which is that's a pretty good flex. So, who's gonna be Batman? Well, me. I love that ideal, and obviously he had his personal issues outside of it, and obviously he's a lot better now, which is the most important thing. Obviously, with what happened with Zack Snyder's family as well, and the whole reshoots and all that absolute insanity with Warner Brothers. Matt Reeves came on board, who is an incredible director from the Apes films, and then it went from Ben Affleck's going to write, direct, and star to Ben Affleck is just going to write and star as Batman, Reeves will direct. Then it was Ben Affleck's just going to star as Batman, and Matt Reeves is going to write and direct. And then, to be fair to Affleck, he openly quit and said, "No, I can't do this anymore." He had his issues, 100% with him on that, and now. I think Matt Reeves deep down, I don't say enjoy, that sounds horrible, but Matt Reeves, we're now getting the Batman. He gets to have a Batman film not set in the DCEU, not, as you guys said really well, actually, not set in a world where there's already aliens, there are superheroes, there are other people there. He gets to take it back to the basics, back to the core.
Yeah.
And I love what all of you have said, but sorry, Harry, I sort of took over from you. But yes.
No, it's fine. Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that. And I would, before I in terms of comparing Affleck and Dalton, I can see the comparisons. And actually, going into Batman vs Superman, I was really worried it'd be too big a concept for me to handle and to cope with. And I actually think it did a decent job of reducing it all in my head and making it reasonably manageable to a reasonably enjoyable point. There were quite a few bits that I did enjoy about it. There were a few parts I didn't, certainly. But Ben Affleck was one of those. I thought he was good in what he did. But I don't know about comparing necessarily, but just speaking about this now, it sort of strikes me as one of those brilliant things about the Batman franchise and the James Bond franchise. It is so good that we have these different incarnations, these different iterations, where I love the fact that John is encouraging us to go back and look at Val Kilmer in Batman Forever. I love that. And I love that there might be some Batman fans who think now I'm going to go back and watch Timothy Dalton Bonds. I'm going to watch Living Daylights and Licensed Skill and learn about that. And as time passes, I'm sure Ben Affleck's appearances in his Batman films will probably grow in value, depending on what maybe happens in this Flash film. I don't know, but this is a wonderful thing about the two franchises, that even though you might be unsure at the time, you get to always have them. You get to always have these different versions, these different creative versions to look back on and debate, and you get these different flavors that one day you're really up for, but maybe the next day you want a different version of Batman or a different version of Bond, and that is strength in the franchise, isn't it? That's strength in the actual content that you get. You've got something that can be reinvented and enjoyed in lots of different variations. So that is the beauty of these two franchises that we're discussing. It's exciting, really.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Val Kilmer mention, because I've seen a lot of people online that last sort of year saying, you know what, Val Kilmer was underrated as Batman, and it is very much he took over from Keaton. And you know, I mean, I fucking love Heat. It's one of my favorite films. He was shooting Heat at the same time as Batman, which is insane to think about. But I think he was a decent Batman. It's just not the one they knew. And there are those Bond comparisons, and I think that's the beauty of this, as you were saying, so Harry, that you know, time has passed, and there will be people that are Batman fans who haven't seen all the Batman films. In the same way, we know there are Bond fans that haven't seen the previous Bond films. And there's such an experience for everybody of any age to take things away from them. And one thing I'd even jump up to saying is that I think even when there's a Bond film you might dislike or not keen on, there are going to be scenes from that film you enjoy. I would argue the same thing from Batman as well. And not every franchise can give you that. I don't think you can look at every franchise think, oh, there's always a fantastic scene in one of those films, whereas with these there always seem to be. And that's gonna kind of, oh god, get into the, I'm gonna have to try and tone myself down for this part. The Bale and Craig eras. This probably, if I was still at uni, this would actually probably be my dissertation. I'm not gonna lie now. Now that someone said it, I'm not gonna turn this into a video essay. I'm loving this roundtable so far. But these two, they go hand in hand with each other, right? One influences the other influences the other, and it just becomes this humongous thing. Obviously, one of them's only just finished last year. So I'm going to go right back to the beginning. And I'm actually going to ask everybody, just because I'm a massive fan. I know Tom's not a fan of him, which I was very surprised by. What does everyone think of Christopher Nolan? I'm really curious to know this. This is on the heat spot. Are we all Nolan fans?
Yeah. I'd say about 5 of Nolan's films are in my top 30 films of all time. You know, I think he is a phenomenal visionary. I think his partnership with his brother is essential. You know, I think that is an essential part of it. I do think he's got a bit too cocky for his own good. In terms of that, I think Tenet's smug, and I think that before that was Dunkirk. Actually, forget that one. That's an amazing film. But I do think he loves this element of time, and I'd like him to just move away with non-linear in time, because I think he's in danger of possibly just getting tarred with that brush, and that's unfair because he's a phenomenal director. What he did with the Batman franchise is basically the benchmark for what every single superhero action genre has tried to do since, and make serious, real life films. And that's a testament to his genius, because no one's matched it since.
Yeah, I'm a massive Christopher Nolan fan. I think he's almost out on his own in his own way. I'm not saying so as a. It's just it's hard to put. So in terms of Batman, I can't believe we are so blessed that we got this guy to make not one but 3, a whole trilogy that is its own thing, that doesn't get someone coming along and doing the next one and it, you know, not quite living up to it, or going in a different direction. I can't believe that. And the three of my favorite films of all time. His other films I absolutely love. Yeah, Tenet I think got it almost got out of hand. But I don't know. I personally don't know whether it's John, you said he's smug. People saying he's arrogant. I don't know, because every time you hear him speak, it's like he thinks he's so. I think he's so taken away with these ideas, and he assumes that the audience is on the same page as him, and so I think that's where he sometimes goes wrong. But he has such ambition, and I don't know. They're just it's always such an experience, and whenever I've been to watch his films at the cinema, like I've heard and felt the audience's breath being taken away at certain scenes. And how many films can you say that about? And it's the same guy that's doing this time after time. So yeah, I think he's amazing.
Yeah, I'm probably unhealthily obsessed with Christopher Nolan. I absolutely adore his films. I can take the point that Tenet is a little bit problematic in some ways, but it's still an incredible action film that's high concept, that's original. We're not living in a world where there are many original stories coming out at the moment. He is constantly thinking of new original stories with groundbreaking gags and groundbreaking and groundbreaking set pieces and effects.
And other bits and pieces.
Yeah, and he's putting them on the cinema, and he's championing cinema. Even in a pandemic, he wanted people to go to the cinema to see a spectacle like Tenet. And even though there are bits that I struggle with understanding it, I don't want to play that down. I don't want to just cast it off and say, it's ambition, and we need ambition, which is great. But I mean, other than that, 100% record for me, really. He's not pulled many missteps at all. It's remarkable.
No, you're right.
And coupled with the writing and it's amazing that he was interested in the Batman franchise, the Batman trilogy. He had a vision for that, which is so wonderful. Like Matt said, it's a real blessing. It's amazing. But just looking at him as a whole, I know not all his films are, but he makes action films. He makes action adventure films, and I love that. Like people see him as like highbrow and very hyper intelligent and not for the masses. Absolutely not. He wants people to come in cinemas to watch an action adventure, and he's had to play with the formula. He's had to come up with new ideas to reinvent things. But at the heart, he loves good story, action, set pieces, and character. He loves all the things, and he's putting them in a new package for us. And we are so fortunate that he put that onto Batman as well. And I haven't got enough praise for Christopher Nolan at all. There's not enough I can say.
Perfect. I could copy you all I really wanted, but I would honestly go on for hours, so I can't. I'm going to bring up Tenet in a bit for some Bond stuff, actually, because Tenet was viewed as his Bond film. It was more like he
Bond on acid.
Yeah, my favorite part was in marketing when he's like, I grew up with hesitates spy films, because he knows he can't actually say James Bond anymore because it's been so associated to him. He just has to now say spy films. We all know what the answer was. But let's go to Batman and Christian Bale. So I was doing a bit of digging recently, and I didn't know this myself. I knew he's a massive Bond fan. He actually said that the Bond films inspired his take on Batman, and that really surprised me, because we'll go over certain scenes and whatnot that he definitely did pay homage to as the years have gone by. But I look at Batman Begins, and I don't see a James Bond film. Like, I know that makes me sound maybe naive, and it's not that he's not a spy, but then you really dig into it, and there's a lot of things. So he spoke about a globe-trotting adventure. Now, Batman's set essentially in Gotham and a bit of Iceland, which is fine, and Bond is about going around those journeys. But what I kind of wanted to start off with, and this is where I really hope it doesn't sound like an essay. Obviously, like 9/11 changed filmmaking for a very long. To this day, it's still massively been changed.
Yeah.
You know, and certainly in I'd say the mid noughties, there was that. You know, Dine Over Days may be a perfect example. We've got to get rid of this hysterical, over the top action comedy stuff. Let's bring it down. We're in a more serious time. We're in, you know, there's a war in theory going on. There's a war in terror. How do you apply this to films? And you know, Batman Begins comes out, and I didn't, again, because I saw The Dark Knight first. I didn't get to see Batman Begins at the cinema until actually just before Tenet came out, which was amazing. But the whole concept of I want my Batman to be set in the real world. It's such a basic premise, right? But it's perfect. Why couldn't there be a take on this character with him existing in today's society? And everyone's copied it since. And you know, I kind of have to say I love Casino Royale, but when we were doing the Casino Royale episode last year, so much of the digging, you know, you've got Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson almost like saying like, yeah, Batman Begins like was massive for us, and we were able to take parts of that and apply it to James Bond, and maybe this is where I'm in my own bubble, right? Because James Bond, yes, he's a spy, yes, it's in the Cold War, but he's not a superhero. He's not a DC comic. He's not in fights with Superman. He is James Bond. But when you put those two films side by side, my word, you can see the influence Nolan had. And I'm kind of curious, like kickstarting this, the sort of the foundation the Dark Knight trilogy has had is almost the entire Daniel Craig era, even up to No Time to Die last year. You know, we joked about the ending earlier. The only other alternative was for him to have somehow survived and have an awkward family reunion, nodding his head in a bar in Italy, which I don't think would have worked either for James Bond, because it would be too much like The Dark Knight Rises. I don't know. How, without getting into like, how do we feel about the eras themselves? Like, do we see those comparisons? I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about Skyfall, I'd imagine, because that has a hell of a lot of plot points, let alone thematics.
So we did our Casino Royale review last year, and this issue came up a lot about the influence of Batman Begins, and I'd probably say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you guys probably came at it from more a critical perspective than I did, really, in terms of the influence in that. Is that fair, or am I speaking out of turn there?
Us?
Yeah, Matt and Harry.
What? So Casino Royale?
Yeah, in terms of like, so we all acknowledge that Batman Begins was a major influence on Casino Royale, but you guys kind of possibly were saying it more in a critical perspective of Casino Royale.
Yeah. I a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was I don't know. Bond Begins. I know it's a
yeah.
Like, well, an almost origin story a bit for Bond, but I don't particularly want to see that. And that, you know, how he gets his 00 status and stuff like that. Wasn't mega keen on seeing that. But you know, I'm not saying they didn't do it well or anything, but I don't know. I just don't think it was as applicable as Batman, if you know, to the Batman formula.
For me personally, I found it like a really good template because we needed to kind of get it to a post 9/11 world. I do feel that everything's cyclical, and at that time it had gone that it needed to be put in the real world, and I felt that Batman was the right template to do that. Plus, you had the advantage of you had the book as well. So you're actually writing, you know, using a novel, which they haven't been using for a long time before. And I loved what they did with it. What I would say is, I mean, I'm not entirely sure. You guys would know better. I'm not entirely sure if Nolan had a trilogy in plan in mind. Obviously, The Dark Knight as a sequel was planned straight after Batman Begins. But did they have to try and convince him to get a trilogy? Is that?
I think he always says he doesn't make a film setting it up for a sequel. And even though people thought that the Joker, that sets it up. Originally, a lot of people at the end of Batman Begins were saying, I could hear people, that leads it into 1989 Batman. Like, that's
right.
Like, that's
okay.
But I was like, probably, yeah,
but,
definitely.
But I think the concept of continuation in the Batman films is far better than it is in the Bond films. There's never been continuation of sorts really in Bond films, and Quantum of Solace is a direct sequel. It's the most continued Bond film, and it's my personal least favorite. It doesn't work for me, and I'd say Skyfall, out of excluding Casino Royale, is my favorite out of the rest of the Craig films, partially because it's its own adventure, or it was until recent times. So there's the positives of the Casino Royale, but we'll probably talk about the negatives of intertwining universes later.
Yeah, so I can see why they took it as a template. Like I say, personally, I wasn't as desperate for it, but I think there are similarities between the characters, but I generally think Craig's Bond was more selfish than Bale's Batman, and Bale had his duty that he, to Gotham, to his city and everything, which always, I know he sort of quit, but that was, the reasons for that were not selfish. That was what that's what he felt Gotham needed him to do for that time. Whereas Craig's Bond was quite selfish. A lot of his motivations are quite selfish, and I thought he's been the Bond actor, or his Bond iteration has been the least committed to duty and committed to serving his country. So I do think there's a difference in that. I know that people, the dark element. Well, I think the Dark Knight trilogy is dark in some ways, but not in others. I don't find it overly. I don't find it depressing or oppressive. I think at times, I think Casino Royale is quite difficult to watch at times. There aren't any scenes in any of the Dark Knight trilogy that are like the torture scene where it's sustained, something like that. There are like one-off bits of like pretty horrible things or suggested horrible things. So I think there are comparisons. I think Casino Royale was very heavily influenced by Batman Begins, but I wouldn't say it copied it. Whereas when we get to Skyfall, I think there are elements that are copied, really.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I like Matt said, and John said, it was an era in filmmaking where people wanted reboots, but they also wanted dark. And then there's this word gritty as well, which is a bit troublesome, because I actually, like Matt says, I don't really think any of the Dark Knight trilogy is gritty. I don't think it's unpleasant. I think it's dark, but there's a gloss to it. There's still escapism. These are still blockbusters. These are still, big scale. I'm not sure that's necessarily true of Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. There's real grit there, which is not, for me, for my personal taste, it wasn't pleasant. And especially when you've come to expect that James Bond is big screen, gloss, bit of glamour and sort of escapism. I don't think Casino Royale struck the balance as well as Dark Knight trilogy did in that respect. But just like looking at the bigger picture, these are two franchises that I independently love. Just going up and up and up. I absolutely love them. I've got Batman, and I've got Bond going up, and they're kind of going up at the same time in my life. Two massive interests. It's just, when that happened with Casino Royale, it was just a bit of a shame to see I'll just copy the other and it becomes similar. A bit like, I can't think of an example, if there is such a thing, I love the music of Tupac, and I love the music of Britney Spears, but I wouldn't want either of them to copy each other. That is in they're too extreme, perhaps far too extreme.
Sounds a phenomenal combination.
Yeah, but as in, they are good in their own right. It's sad when you see one lean on the other.
Yeah.
Then you're starting to worry about signs of wilting, franchise wilting, and Christopher Nolan reinvented Batman's, but he didn't lean on anything. He didn't borrow liberally or heavily in his themes and his approach to them. Whereas I think Casino Royale did, and only slightly, and it had a chance to veer back, but the trajectory it set off James Bond on as not worked for me as a James Bond fan, sadly, I'd say.
It's really interesting as well, because I think if you get Casino and then you get Quantum, right? And we'll get the Skyfall chatting, because that is massive too. Obviously, that is post Dark Knight. That's being filmed at the same time as Rises, so that kind of influence. But Quantum went in such not an opposite direction, but the 300 miles an hour editing sequences that weren't needed, and it went so far off the style of Casino that I feel, because of the backlash to that as well, when it came to Skyfall, the anniversary year, the big release, we've had no Bond film for X amount of years. I don't want to say they played it safe, because they didn't. I mean, I love Skyfall, but bringing Sam Mendes in, who isn't inherently an action director, his work, maybe similar to Nolan, right? And I mean, Nolan pre-Batman hadn't done action films. He'd done, Following, which he's funded himself and shot by himself. Memento, which couldn't be anything opposite than action, and a remake of Insomnia. And Sam Mendes, similar. Okay, we've got this guy, and actually maybe a commentary on Hollywood. There's been this sort of insane wave. I think Sony's a good example, who obviously also were involved in Bonds. They bring on these directors for Spider-Man films who have just done 1 or 2 indie films, and they just sat there crossing their fingers. We're going to get a Christopher Nolan out of this guy, and there's no background, there's no story, but these guys are still the puppet masters. They're telling them what to do. Whereas Nolan wasn't ever told what to do by Warner Brothers. They were like, listen, you can go and do this. Go and make your film. And going back to, apologies, I forgot to mention earlier, Nolan didn't start to make a trilogy. I think the story is, it's never been confirmed, is that after The Dark Knight, he had the whole world at his hands. They wanted a third Batman film, and he said, I want Inception. And I've always imagined the conversation went, if you give me Inception, I will come back and do a third Batman film, and I'll end it there. And that's how I've always viewed the Nolan trilogy, is that Inception is the integral part of this. Because, let's be blunt, Batman's like the best stepping stone a director's ever going to get. He now has an unlimited anything for any of his films. And his new one starts filming this week, Oppenheimer. And he's got like Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon. It's endless. More people have been cast today. And he's got the whole world in his hands because he built his legacy with Batman. And I know that's kind of nothing to do with Bond as per such, but when you get to Skyfall, you can't not notice some of those plot elements. And the really obvious one is the whole, he wanted us to capture him so he could break out of jail. And as cinema so often does, you get one film, and Dark Knight's not the first ever film that did this. I know Silence of the Lambs has done it. I know loads before that would have done it. But post Dark Knight, everybody was suddenly doing the whole villain wanted to be captured storyline. I think Avengers 1 did it, Skyfall did it. I'm probably sure one of the Transformers films did it. I don't know if you can even count them. But so many films were doing this. And and I love Javier Bardem in Skyfall, and I really enjoy Skyfall, but you can't just not think, well, yeah, they just did it because it works in The Dark Knight. And it was Heath Ledger's Joker. And Javier Bardem, he's not like the Joker, but he kind of is. Like, he's this one-man war machine. You don't know what he's going to do next. He's unpredictable. Yeah. He's dangerous, and he's obsessed with this individual. The same way the Joker's obsessed with Batman. His obsession is M. And I mean, Skyfall discussions could go on forever, but I'm kind of curious, like, as Bond fans, was this first time watching Skyfall back in 2012? Was this something that immediately jumped out to you? And is Skyfall jumping that bridge where these become locked in, that you can't escape the Batman and Bond's similarities of that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was very obvious when I first watched it, and I was okay with it. I was so depressed after Quantum of Solace, which is no Batman influence whatsoever. It's a rip-off of Jason Bourne, and a flipping bad one at that. But it's having a renaissance. It's truly Fleming, and sorry, just to sit on the fence. And so I was happy that it went down the route of going down that road. I thought Sam Mendes was a great call. I was excited about that big name. It was a great time to be British, though. You'd have the Olympics, you'd have the Bond at the Olympics, to get a big name British director. You know, after Nolan, he was probably the next biggest name director of that generation, of that era. It was a great thing for it. So I don't mind them. Yeah, there's complete knockoffs of the story. It's by far and away the biggest knockoff of any of the stories. But and I don't want to take away what people said, but throughout Bond history, Bond has always been influenced by pop culture. You can go throughout every single Roger Moore film, blaxploitation, kung fu, Jaws, Star Wars. It goes through all the way. So, not Die Hard, License to Kill, the greatest Bond film of all time. It's got its Lethal Weapon and Die Hard influences, and it's all the better for it. So I don't mind the Batman Begins influences in Casino Royale. I think it goes too far, looking back with hindsight, in Skyfall, because it's directly ripping off actual plot points. I'm so glad that and I very rarely say this on villains, but I'm so glad they gave Raoul Silver a backstory, because if they'd have not, he would have just been an agent of chaos like the Joker. And it is very rare that I say that. Usually I just want a villain who just wants world domination. But I am glad they did that, because it at least gives some subtlety. And actually, if we're talking about Amazon spin-off series, I want to see a Breaking Bad series of Tiago Rodriguez becoming Raoul Silver. I think that would be fascinating doing, actually. You know, you could have M from 30 years ago and Q from 30 years ago. And anyway, that's a different point. So there are influences. Go on, Matt.
So can we come on later to talk about Bond elements in Nolan films? Shall I just talk about Skyfall?
Maybe Skyfall now. Honestly, this section.
I've got so much to say on all this. So I'll just stick
the rhythm section.
Yeah, I really I did have my struggles with Casino Royale. I've been able to appreciate it more. Quantum of Solace I still massively struggle with, and I did at the time. So I wasn't massively excited about Skyfall, but there was this, the Olympics. There'd been a bit of a gap, so it didn't feel like Quantum was directly, still rearing its ugly head over my shoulder. And I did enjoy Skyfall at the cinema, and to be honest, I still enjoy watching it. I find it the most enjoyable of Daniel Craig's Bond films. But yeah, the influences, which I think is quite a generous word, from The Dark Knight were obvious at first viewing and have only got more obvious, particularly when we did our review a couple of years ago. So there are various things. Raoul Silver, he is, he's a madman, and I know he does have a backstory and a bit of a kind of motive, but I think a lot of action films these days are getting lazier, because they're copying this idea that the villain is just mad, or you don't know who the villain is until right at the end, and it's either the mentor, a bit like Batman Begins. But I mean, it's been done before, or whatever. And very often these days, action films villains don't particularly have any kind of scheme, and I think that's snuck into the Bond franchises, Bond films in the franchise quite a bit. And a lot of popular action films these days, John Wick, Nobody, which I watched the other day, films like that, it's just about revenge. It's like, well, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you, and then we'll do this to you. So the villains don't seem to have a massive kind of scheme. Mission Impossible, they do, and a lovely ticking clock. Got to save something by this point, or whatever. No Time to Die tried to do it, but I don't know. So, but I do feel Raoul Silver was massively influenced by the Joker, but that was fine because they got such a good actor in, and he really made the most of it. I do think whether the Hong Kong scenes in The Dark Knight influenced the Shanghai scenes, possibly.
Oh, yeah.
The one that no one really mentions, I think, is the villain dressing up as a policeman to try and assassinate the main authority figure in the films. There's obviously, getting deliberately. He wanted us to get, he wanted to be caught. That is a massive one. I'm sure there are others which Harry will, and I just think that seems a bit copying to me. That's a bit. Here's my homework. Change it a little bit so it looks a bit different. But the teacher's smart enough to know. Whereas when we come up, I'll come on to it later. But there are massive Bond influences in homages in Nolan's work. But I don't see it as copying because he's not. I don't know. I just think, particularly when it's story, that's I don't know, lazy or a bit naughty. Having said all that, I still enjoy watching Skyfall.
I very similar to the other two. Skyfall did come as a bit of a breath of fresh air. Watching it in the cinema, there was a real point where I became aware of the fact that I was I was enjoying myself. I was happy. This was James Bond, and the moments I loved about Skyfall were when it felt exciting and it felt like James Bond, and Daniel Craig was being suave, sophisticated, and enjoying being James Bond. And I thought all those moments were great. At the time, straight away, I was becoming aware of comparisons with The Dark Knight, like on the spot there in the cinema, kind of it. And from my experience, I remember mentioning this to a few people at the pub. I think you were there, Matt, and probably there might have been a dozen people there who were all talking about it. And I explained my theory that it follows The Dark Knight quite a lot, and none of them agreed and laughed me out of the park pretty much. They didn't quite see it. So maybe it's not a universally known thing. I don't know. But I do, and there's a difference between things inspired by or in homage to something and things that are just copying and borrowing. Yeah. And it's actually quite a variety of things where you've obviously got the villain who's similar, as I said, that dressing up little devices like that. And one that Matt didn't mention, which is almost like a filmmaking copying, is the whole. It's like a montage or a sequence where it all comes together to put the assassination of M. You've got lots of things going on at the same time, where and there's Bond trying to get to somewhere, a bit like the death of Rachel Dawes, as in there's lots of things intertwining, and it just felt like a very Christopher Nolan constructed sequence where some timelines were crossing. So it was even like borrowing devices, and just the more things that you do like that, the less Bond it became. And I agree with John's point that Bond's always been influenced by these things, whether it's space or whatever. But this was like different ways of copying The Dark Knight, a lot of different ways of tapping into what made people happy, and in a lazy way, talking the sort of math. It was just a little bit lazy, which is disappointing. That said, it is the Daniel Craig Bond film I will return to more than any of his others, certainly.
It wasn't
perhaps because it's like The Dark Knight.
Sorry, it wasn't helped as well. The montage and stuff was that Thomas Newman's score sounded far more like a Zimmer score than it did a Bond score.
Yeah.
That didn't help either.
You've got Rachel on the phone confessing her love to Harvey Dent for her final words. And you've got M giving this poetic speech, which I thought she was going to get. I think, was it fair for everyone back at the time to go into Skyfall and think M was going to die? I thought that was on the cards from the day we saw trailers. I think Judi Dench had hinted that it'd be a final film. And I thought, we're going to get a Rachel Dawes. Not that I want to see Judi Dench get a headshot or something in a room, but that was all built up for her to die. And I think had she died in that moment, I think the film would have fundamentally failed. Because then I would have got even more of that Dark Knight stuff. And it's a really good point. That I was actually going to talk about homages, and I'm glad you brought up, Harry, because there's such a fine line between homage and just copying. And it's, when a director's paying homage to something, it's not going to be obvious. It's like a nod of the head. Yeah. It's like, I get you. This is it. This is me trying to show you something. Whereas when it's here's a story purpose, I'm using this to push the plot, push the characters, get into an environment. That's when you're like, okay, Beautiful Sky, for example, the DB5 turns up. Of course, this Bond 50 homage absolutely has a right to be there. But then then the whole he wanted to capture them all along, even Home Alone, if you want to stretch it. It's those kind of things that you start to think, oh. And I'm not gonna lie, I love the Home Alone stuff in Skyfall. I've always loved that. And
like Home Alone,
and talking Nolan, because I think, I mean, when I was doing this last night, I immediately went to, okay, when's Nolan sort of done a I mean, actually thinking about this recently, I saw the new Uncharted film, which is I really hated. Don't recommend it. I don't know if you've seen it, but they do. I mean, it was in one Uncharted 3 game. They do the Living Daylights cargo plane stuff, but I say they do the Living Daylights, though, I'm telling you this is disgusting. Green screen CGI in a studio. The camera's not even focused on him, and the worst thing is it's not even adapting the game mechanism of the scene, and the game was homaged by Living Daylights. And here is a stunt person doing a sequence, which is a fantastic sequence. Sorry to rant about Uncharted, but I was so aggravated watching it because it's not hard to do. If you can do stunts like that in the late 80s, it's definitely not easy to do stunts like that in the 20s. I'm just going to say that. It's about the effort of going out to do them. And this time I'm going to bring a License to Kill. So, I think on the License to Kill review, I said that was the last James Bond film I'd never seen. So the first time I saw License to Kill was in 2012 when I got the box set. That was the last one. The one, because it was never on ITV because it was rated 15. So as a kid, I was familiar with all of them. I was like, what's this License to Kill that's on this PS3 game I'm currently playing, which was a terrible game, 007 Legends. And it never clicked to me that it was like the opening sequence of The Dark Knight Rises. And maybe because, so you remember the Nolan would do prologues, you'd have to go to an IMAX like the year before to get the scene. And I remember downloading it, and it was like, it was incredible seeing that set piece. Oh my god, this new Batman film coming out and all this. And it was only the last few years I was like, Nolan's done the License to Kill, but he doesn't have Batman on an aeroplane picking up Bane at the bottom. He is saying, I would like to do this stunt. But also, he wanted a plane capturing a bigger plane, which is the most Nolan thing you could ever think of until he actually blew a plane for Tenet. And he wanted to do it as a stunt in the air with the casts. And that worked. And, we know he likes to pay homage to films. And even before The Dark Knight Rises, I guess the obvious one's Inception, right? The ice level, it's on a Master Secret Service. The design is uncanny. It's intentional, and he spoke about it. I think that's when the first ever Bond should do Batman talk began. What was it, that film? And what I'm kind of curious is to go on with this now. Maybe the Dark Knight trilogy, we've got them, but with Nolan's work, there's a reason why he's always asked about Bond, because he does pay homage to it. And we'll get into like the ensemble cast stuff after, because I think that's going to be a really cool discussion point. But I'm curious, are there any other big set pieces that you've ever clocked that in Nolan's work that feels like it's straight out of a Bond thing? Because we know he's an advocate of cinema. He's a smart guy, and he knows film, and we know he knows the James Bond films. And I think that's a big thing as well.
There's Skyhook from The Dark Knight, the way he captures
Loud.
The beacon.
That is, that's in Thunderball. That's how sort of at the very end of Thunderball, that's how he's kind of rescued. There's that link.
I've got a biggie, but that people won't notice. I don't think, but I think it's a massive one.
Are you thinking of Batman Begins' License to Kill? Or?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Go for it.
So in which way round shall I do it? In Batman Begins, he needs to get to the train, and he's in the Narrows and getting swamped by people, and the only way that he can get away and onto the train is to shoot his grapple hook, and then that releases him from the thingy, and then I absolutely love that. In the same way, on License to Kill, when the plane with all the cash is about to get away, he is down at the bottom, with the scuba divers who are like, properly about to kill him, and the only way he can get away is by shooting his harpoon with the grapple onto the very thing he needs to get onto, which releases him to get away. I think that must be, and I love them story-wise and action-wise. That's such good filmmaking.
Yeah,
and I think it's an homage. But
John, any more, or is it because it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because he's paying respect, and these are films he enjoys. Like, I think even sorry, Harry, you mentioned the Dark Knight one. They make reference to when they're talking about the Skyhook stuff. They say, I don't know if it's a reference to World War II or to like the Cold War, but it's like they used to use this to get out of situations. It's like, if you know that now, then you're going to be on pilot thinking, oh, that was done in Thunderball, and it's really interesting. And I'd even jumped so far as to Tenet to go back to that. That I feel like that's his Bond film. I mean, it's like not Nolan doing Bond. Here's his spy film with the Nolan aesthetic, the Nolan
spy, isn't it?
The time variation. Yeah, and I watched it again recently, the first time since the cinema. Now I was a bit of a psycho when this film came out, so I saw it like 5 times. Didn't understand it the first, fine the second, but it did something to me no film has ever made me do. I wrote like 12 pages of notes. It was like 4 a.m. I'd become the Charlie Day meme on the wall. I was unhinged. But I was having so much fun deciphering this film for like ever and explaining it to people, which is maybe sounds a bit like egotistical at the same time. But that every time I've seen it since, I'm just noticing this insane stuff from it. And I absolutely love it for it. And also, that is that Bond stuff, right? Let's go traveling around the world. Let's start off at an opera theatre. We'll get you pre-title sequence, which has been that's an obvious one. Pre-title sequence is like a fundamental of basically every Nolan film now. Yeah, it's like the Pierce Brosnan era. I always say it's the big action set piece. He wants to get you on board, get the IMAX cameras rolling, and all it would take would be for the Bond films to say, "Here's a 6-minute prologue for Bond," which they could also do if they really wanted to. But yeah, I don't want to sound like sort of just keep going out. Anyone's got any of this? I said just. Get them out, 'cause I'm more than happy to talk characters, the ensembles. If anyone could think of any of us, John, just get them out of there. There's no wrong answer either.
No, they're the main ones. The two ones you said were the main ones that I looked at. It's that fine point, isn't it, of paying a homage without making something the pinnacle. I talk about this kind of thing all the time. My favorite band is Oasis. You have some songs like the start of "Don't Look Back in Anger" has the same 2 notes as Imagine. So it's like that there is, but it doesn't influence the song. It's just a little, and that's what you want. On the flip side, you've got Shaker Maker, which is the absolute rip-off of I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing. And that isn't a homage. That is a complete direct copy. And I think that the things that you've given of homage are homages. So yeah, I'm all for it. And
you've given
the ones
me one more.
Go on.
The stair sequence in No Time to Die. We know it's Hans Zimmer. Did everyone feel like they were watching The Dark Knight? When he's going up the stairs, the music's kicking in.
Oh, if you want to go Bond influences on, Batman, we can start talking about that all night.
No. Honestly, I mean, no, because it was in Batman. Think of the Dark Knight soundtrack, maybe because it's Hans Zimmer, but the No Time to Die score that felt like a Batman film at the end. Not that it's a bad thing. I think Hans Zimmer's score for Bond was. I mean, I'm a diehard Zimmer fan. I was surprised at how great that score was, only because he had such a short window of time to record it. But inherently, it plays like a Dark Knight soundtrack, and I love that sequence. But it felt very weird to hear that on a Bond film.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think in general, almost Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy have more in common with Bond films than they do with like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin in a lot of ways. He has made them a bit more globe-trotting than Batman films normally are. I mean, it'd be a bit strange if in Batman Forever they went to Hong Kong or or Iceland or wherever it is that they are in Batman Begins, or in The Dark Knight Rises they're unnamed, where the pit is, or they mention Uzbekistan and well that's the prologue is in Uzbekistan. So they're pretty Bond type things. Those.
Yeah. Definitely.
Right. So, John, did you want to say something? Sorry about the other references. Sorry, just before we
No,
use
I'm fine.
characters.
I was just being silly. You go carry on.
That's not.
Go for it.
To me, this has been the big thing. This is going to be another Skyfall chat. But what Nolan did with the Dark Knight ensemble, right? You've got Michael Caine as Alfred. So, I mean, the other Michael Gough, I loved him as Alfred. Very much supporting character, but he didn't have a character. He didn't have a story. You know, yes, it wasn't an origin, but he was always the butler. It helped them out. It made the odd joke, but then you get Michael Caine. And you get Commissioner Gordon, you get Gary Oldman, who to me is one of the best ever British actors. He's always one of my favorite actors since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And we get a whole 3-film character development from like lieutenant to sergeant to commissioner to resignation. We've got Lucius Fox, who makes his gadgets for him in the Q role. And the one big takeaway I've always had from that Dark Knight trilogy was you became invested in the supporting characters as well as Batman. Now, you know, I think it's safe to say you can always enjoy Q and M in pre-Craig Bond films. They're not fully developed, but they never need to be. You always enjoyed them for who they were. You didn't need to know M's backstory. You didn't need to know Q's backstory. You just enjoyed them interacting with James Bond in the present, and that was always the beautiful sort of relationship between them. And then I feel that when you do get, you get to Skyfall, here's a Q. And I really enjoyed Ben Whishal's Q in Absolute Truth, but maybe Spectre's the biggest drop-off. Let's give them all their own side storyline.
Yeah.
Let's and this is where, is it a comparison? Is it a criticism? It's kind of both. That you can afford to give a bit of time to develop Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon, develop the others, but Ralph Fiennes as M in Skyfall. I loved the content that we got to see how M became the new M. That he was this government advisor. We got some really cool bit of backstory. He was a soldier. That was perfect, and that's all you probably ever need. But to then get the whole, let's go anti-drones in the next one. Let's have Moriarty being Moriarty. Let's have Q helping save the day. Even oh god, I forgot his name. Tanner gets his moments. Man drops off a skyscraper, lands to the bottom, looks over. He's dead. Wow, I expected him to be on all fours. How do we feel about the influences? Because to me, that's where it felt the most like Batman was. Let's give everyone in the supporting roles their own character arcs. And I don't think it worked, if I'm being honest.
I think James Bond has always, throughout the 90s, has had a vast majority of supporting MI6 characters. So you've had Robinson, you've had Tanner throughout the 90s as well. So I think a larger team of supporting characters isn't influenced by Nolan. I do think characters' backstories are influenced by Nolan. I would argue that Mission Impossible as well has influenced it, because for some of them it's not so much backstories, it's just that they have to be massively involved in the action. Like you've got an Avengers Assemble kind of thing going on, where it's not just Bond being a spy, it's basically they all meet at the pub, don't they, in Spectre, and then they all go and do a job together, and it's a bit, it's so contrived, it's untrue. I preferred some aspects, saying this out loud, in No Time to Die. I felt Moneypenny especially was reined back into the role that Moneypenny should do, and I thought it was my favourite performance of Naomi Harris. Actually, I thought she was great in that. But the criticism was that she wasn't used enough. But to me, it's like, but no, look at Moneypenny throughout the series. Moneypenny isn't used a lot. That's why she's great. I thought they got Q right in the last one. Q went on the mission at the end. But Q went on a lot of missions. Desmond was in the Bahamas in Thunderball. He went to Japan in You Only Live Twice. And he wasn't being action man there. He was doing his job on the plane. So I think, again, they pulled that back. The problem is what they did with Ray Fiennes is M in No Time to Die. So for all I've said about them bringing it back, because Spectre was a mess in that sense in terms of those characters. And I don't think it's a massive Nolan influence. I think it's more a Mission Impossible influence. What they did with M and that kind of character change is, for me, way off the mark.
No, I agree. Everyone else? It's really interesting though, because I love what you said about Q as well. He was always involved on his missions, and
Yeah, it was.
he's a quartermaster. That's inherent his role. Why wouldn't he be there helping them with equipment, helping them with stuff when needed? You would ship him there, but it's when people like M start going on with them, and you're like, you're head of British intelligence. Should you be there?
Yeah, I think that there are elements of the Nolan Batman films in terms of those supporting characters. I know that he wanted, for Batman Begins, he wanted a really strong supporting cast because he looked to Superman the movie and the brilliant supporting cast that there was for that, and so that inspired him to put it around, and also it took the pressure off Christian Bale to have to carry the film. So then when it comes to, the Scooby-Doo gangers, and sometimes perhaps unfairly, I think that so they've taken them away for Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. I don't particularly like that they did, but I understand why they did. And then reintroducing, honestly, I do like Skyfall, but I'm not majorly keen on giving Moneypenny this backstory where she's. I don't see how it's progressive to say, right, she's a woman, she's a field agent, but actually, no, she's not very good, so we'll stick you behind a desk because that's where.
Absolutely.
I don't see how that's progressive, but So, but I think one of the problems is, and a bit like the Nolan films, they got good famous actors in those roles, which means you've got to give them something to do.
Yeah.
I think I don't mind. In GoldenEye, we hear that Moneypenny. I was on date, if you must know. I don't mind that Naomi Harris has when she's. I mean, I don't think the scene's very good because it's the chase scene, but loads of exposition in Spectre. But I don't mind the fact that she's got a fella because I don't know. There's some nice, it's an opportunity for nice interaction and banter. And then in No Time to Die, I don't mind the fact that Q's waiting for a date and that it's a man, and there's that sort of element. And I quite like that they're just thrown out there. We don't then need to have Q's future husband or Moneypenny's future husband in peril at the end being saved. I don't think Bond. No, thank you. But I wouldn't want loads of that all the time. And Lucius Fox, we don't know. I don't know if he's married. I don't know if he's got children or anything. We never hear about anything like that. So I don't know. There are some elements, and I think they. Just as Christopher Nolan got in some strong actors to play those supporting roles, they've done that as well with the Craig Bond films. And again, they've not quite worked out how much they want them in or what they want to do with them. But I don't mind them generally. And it's funny because Tanner's always there. We don't know anything about him, but so they're all right with that because Rory Kinnear isn't as much of a famous, perhaps, actor as Ben Whishaw or Naomi Harris.
He got his own character poster as well,
He did, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's not much I can add to that, other than I think, obviously, Christopher Nolan was only managing a trilogy, whereas the Daniel Craig era is, it extends more than that, going from director to director, varying writers. So obviously there was a more consistent vision with Nolan. So I think he was able to keep a leash on characters' involvement, and he was able to hold some back, knowing how they fit into the plot. And like Matt said, we know about Gordon's family in the Dark Knight trilogy. They're a fairly big part of it, actually. But like Lucius Fox, you don't know much about. and even Alfred, who's such a a father figure, really, he is like M in that you the traditional M before Ray Fiennes, that you don't know exactly where they've come from. I know there was speculations about like Alfred, and I think Michael Caine came up with his own personal backstory for it, but that wasn't shown on cinema. Well, it might have been shown, but it was not told. If you know what I mean. Whereas I think the James, and I think they're right to try and tap into this a little bit with the Mission Impossible, where there's a group of them helping each other, where they've all got different specialities. It really works in the Mission Impossible films, and it provides good humor as well, because you get the banter between them. I don't think that's something you get from the Nolan films. There is good banter between like Fox and Wayne and stuff like that, but I do think the Bond films perhaps looked more to kind of the Simon Pegg and Ethan Hunt. Sorry, I don't know Simon Pegg's character name.
Benji.
Benji, yeah. I think they probably tried to get that for Bond and Q when it's Craig and Wishaw. I think they've probably tried to recreate that. And I think it's right, but I just think from Craig film to Craig film, they've never had a consistent vision of the group, and sometimes they're central, sometimes they're there. It's a little bit, like I say, from film to film, and that's based on the difference in writers, and the stories. But I think what's certainly in the Batman films is that they all are very functional. The supporting cast, they're there for a reason. They're not, even though they are famous actors, they're pretty essential to the story, and they play their part in the mission. Whereas I think sometimes that's not always been the case with the James Bond supporting cast. I don't think they've been very well constructed to either play their parts or step back at the correct times. They've kind of just been thrown in there a little bit as big names.
No, absolutely. It makes a really fascinating discussion point with it, is how everyone varies, but you do get some films they will jump in with that, and it's really interesting getting your thoughts on that one. What I want to kind of do is to round off this, because it's been pretty heavy talking the Craig and one line as much as it's been. I'm going to end this on not this video, just this little segment. We're almost done. People at home, don't cry. They're getting upset. 2 questions for each of you. Number 1, do you want to see Nolan direct a Bond film? Number 2, do you think he will ever actually direct a Bond film? That is the big one that I think everyone's probably answered before. But I think, obviously, I want to see it, but I don't want it to be the next James Bond. I think he wants to pick his Bonds. He would want casting, and I'm with him for that. But I think his era would be too much like Craig's. Will it happen one day in the future? I honestly don't know. I would like to think. I feel that if he never directs Bond once in his life, we've all been wronged of like the one British director who on a plate should have a Bond film, whether it's in 10 years, 5 years. I'm curious to know what you will think.
If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, I'd have said absolutely yes, desperate, get him in right now. Now I'm going to say no. And the reason why I'm going to say no is because I think we've succumbed to the big director obsession in Bond. And what we actually need to get, and to get them in, we've had to plea to their demands at times. And what we need really is focus. If you look at the legacy of James Bond, I don't want to use this word derogatory because it sounds, but they weren't name directors predominantly. They were, I suppose, like workmanlike, but that sounds so disparaging. I don't mean it in that sense. I mean it in terms of the sense of they got on with the job. They were part of a unit. It was a family. They got on. There was a continuation. They had a visionary at the top who led from the front, and everything flowed from that. And the idea of John Glenn, who never directed a film in his life, to then produce 5 holy grail films from the 80s in a consistent period, is unbelievable testament to him, but it's also testament to the way that Eon works. And I feel that, like, whilst Nolan would undoubtedly make an amazing film, I have no doubt about that, the continuation after could actually be worse than it is now, because there would be a pressure to replicate and go. What they need, first and foremost, is a visionary producer who says, this is where we're going, this is how we're doing it, this is our team, and we build from within, and we keep James Bond and the character the focus, and we don't get some big name in who will make on demand.
Yeah, very similarly to John. I would have loved it a number of years ago. I think, yeah, I mean, as John's saying, if Christopher Nolan comes on board to make a Bond film, and I would absolutely love it. I'm sure I would love the film, and I would, a lot of it would bring me a great deal of excitement. But then that, a Christopher Nolan film in its own right is an event nowadays. That's a big thing. I don't want that ahead of or equal to or slightly less than a Bond film. And I think directors nowadays get more focused than they ever have before, and they have to put their own style on things, and they have to have their signature calling cards. And I love great cinematography, but not at the expense of action or story or adventure or those sorts of things. And I think I'm a bit, I do have that. That tide seems to be turning a bit in that way. So I wouldn't, because I think it goes against what I think is, like John says, you want people who are either already in the Bond family or can easily come in. And I actually thought Cary Fukunaga was quite a good choice, and he does a good job in a lot of ways. I think, again, he likes his one shot, so he did that whole sequence, up the stairs and everything. But yeah, I think, and the other thing about Christopher Nolan is, quite rightly, and I love this, and I love the fact that, again, he had a consistent kind of team around him for the Batman trilogy, but it was his own team. It was his team. So I don't want, again, as John's, if say he does one or even two, and he's got, I don't know, Hans Zimmer or Ludwig Göransson on, his composer duties, and then he's got his own editor, he's got his own cinematographer and whatever, and then suddenly, for the third film or the second film, it's just a load of different people and a different. I don't know. That would. I don't know. It just wouldn't work. And I don't think a director on a Bond film should be calling all the shots. The producers should be saying, "This is, you can do this, that, and the other, but this is how it works. This is who you're having as your editor, as your composer, and go and give us a great Bond film, and it'll work wonders for your career, and it'll be brilliant for us." So there you go.
Yeah, I put the child in me that's wants instant gratification and wants to be excited straight away would say yes to Nolan, because the levels of excitement I got for, like, The Dark Knight, just watching behind the scene footage that was emerging in the build up and the viral campaign, and I properly obsessed over The Dark Knight. If I was able to do that with James Bond, it'd just be like, in so many ways, the marriage made in heaven. Yeah. But that's probably too short-sighted. And right now, exactly as John and Matt said, there needs to be a real broader vision for James Bond, where actually the character of James Bond is central to it all. We've gotten a real pickle recently where, Daniel Craig became a producer and called the shots for the character itself, and that also has knock-on effects for other cast members, because now it's brought an end to their tenure. But, like, it's got to be someone removed slightly from the Bond situation in the producer role, I think, that's got to do this. And I think it wouldn't suit Nolan to fit into another team. He is someone who's He's all encompassing. He's part of the
No,
whole thing. He's
sir.
part of every part of the film, pretty much. Yeah, isn't? Yeah. So I don't think it would be right for him to do that, and I don't think it's what James Bond needs. I think with Batman it works because 3 films is about the right amount. That's probably the maximum you could go to make it work, because like comic books, there can be lots of different versions of a superhero. With James Bond, we need a vision that's like 15, 20 films, and that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but like a 15 film vision of where we're going. And Christopher Nolan can't commit to that. And even if he directed a few and then went to executive producer like Man of Steel, that didn't work really, did it? In terms of, there were some Nolan possible slight influences, but it wouldn't work even if he stepped back a little bit. Never mind if he stepped back a lot. So I don't think it'd be the right thing to do. If I was a child, I'd say yes. If I was an old wise man, I'd say no, it's not right. So I'll try and be an old wise man and say no, even though I completely agree, George. It feels like if we died never having seen Christopher Nolan do a James Bond film, that would feel slightly wrong. Maybe if there is a big vision that's unveiled, Christopher Nolan might fit in later on. I don't know.
I think he might feel a bit gutted if he never ends up doing one personally, but
he'll keep getting asked about it. He'll be in his 70s and I'll say, so are you doing the new Bond film yet? And he'll be that I've been having this for 30 years. No, it's a fascinating, because I'm literally 2 years ago, I'd have been like, yeah, give it, make sure he does it. And his film release dates used to be parallel with Bond as well, which is what was always amazing. Obviously with COVID, I guess he got a year gap on them with Tenet coming out early. Obviously his new film's filming now, and I'd always say, like, if for whatever reason, let's say that whatever iteration of Bond starts working, if he could come on board to a crew that's already there, kind of what you all said, I think that I'd love that. I just can't see it, and that's where I am with it. That there was a new Bond who did 2 or 3 films, who was phenomenal, and then there's like, I'd love to work with this actor and this crew. I'd all be for it, but do I see that happening? That's where I struggle, and it's a shame, but maybe one day. Oh God. So that's gonna like round up. Honestly, that's gonna round up most of it, because the next couple of it is just me. What I was gonna kind of get onto is that I feel like in modern day Hollywood, and we've been going almost 2.5 hours. These films, you don't stop. There's a new Batman film coming out. Rob Pattinson's Batman. Guess what? Next year there'll be people saying, so who's going to be the new Batman after Rob Pattinson? In the same way that for who has been the media champion of Daniel Craig series, Idris Elba, right? Every year is Idris Elba going to be the new Bond jet? And I think this is where Bond and Batman's becoming this like modern day pop culture, that I've kind of, going back to Ben Affleck, I was so shocked at Ben Affleck being cast as Batman 2 years after Christian Bale stepped off. Christian Bale was Batman. And now here we are, like 8 years later, I'm sat here saying I've just accepted that there will always be a Batman now. There's always going to be a new James Bond. And it makes me sound miserable saying this. I'm not miserable, I love it. But it's these kind of sentiments which makes me think Batman has paralleled into James Bond's legacy on cinema now. And someone could say, oh, it's DC, you get different takes. Well, I don't think there's always a discussion about who could play the next Superman. I don't think you get discussions on who's going to be the next Spider-Man, the Avengers, the X-Men. Whereas I think Bond is the only one I can honestly say, take Bond out of... Sorry, not Bond, Batman. You can take the Batman characters out of isolation, put him on that level with Bond and say, these two are probably the biggest... Not IPs, because IPs, you bring stuff like Star Wars, but Bond and Batman, that one-man war machine, I think these two are at the pinnacle of that in cinema. And the beauty of Bond is that it's British cinema. And ironically, we've got another British Batman, which is actually quite great. So that always does help. Where I kind of wanted to go next, not even talking like future takes, it kind of like I was going to mention about, how does each take difference? We've gone over so much of that. I'm actually a bit of a loss. I think what I want to do, sort of heading into the outro, the last thing we spoke about Nolan. I think it would be very rude to bring you all on with no current Bond and just ask everybody before we get to the outros and rounding off, who do you want to see play the next Bond? Or is that something you've all discussed? I'm curious. I mean, I'm in the Oh God, I've forgotten his name. That's a terrible start.
Richard Madden, are you a big fan?
Richard Madden. Richard Madden is still my pick for who I want to see next one. Age, he's the right age. He's in his late 30s. You can get 10 years out of him. He's Scottish. You get a bit of old Bond heritage with that. He's not tied to any franchises anymore. I don't think he was ever big enough in Game of Thrones or Marvel to be only associated with previous characters. I'm on the Richard Madden hype train. So that's mine. If you haven't got one, you don't have to say one either, because I know the whole next Bond debate could go on for probably days as well.
No, it's fair. I'd happily take Madden. I think Madden would be great. I loved The Bodyguard. I thought it was brilliant. But I have been championing Henry Cavill for years, and I will continue to champion him. Watching The Man from U.N.C.L.E., he can do it. Some people are complaining and say, "Oh, it's safe." Well, I think that's what we need after this monstrosity, and we need someone who looks the part and who wants the job and who will throw himself 100%. And this is what he will do. And if you get 3 films in the next 9 years of Henry Cavill, which single stories, I don't know. If you want to champion the spirit of Brosnan, so be it. Let's just get on with it. I tell you now, I just don't think it'll be either of them. I think it'll be a complete left-wing choice that none of us have discussed.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have chatted about it, in our like WhatsApp group and stuff, really 007, and I think we're all on a similar page in terms of it almost feels a bit like give it Allardyce until the end of the season.
Yeah.
It's too obvious.
But
it's too obvious, isn't it?
But I just think that is what we need, and I just think his films would instantly be a lighter touch to them. It wouldn't be. I know maybe Man of Steel and that are gritty and whatnot, but I don't know. I can just see him being a bit of a Brosnan for the whatever decade we're in and everything. Other choices, I wouldn't be averse to Dan Stevens.
No.
I'd be all right with him. And then other than that, an unknown. But I think Craig, and fair play to him, has obviously taken the franchise and he's produced the films that amongst the most, they've been hugely successful. Some of them very popular with critics and fans alike. And I do think he has a movie star status about him, a movie star quality, which is fair enough and can't be something that you easily replicate. But he was a left field choice at the time, and I just think maybe they should go a bit safer.
Yeah. I just feel sorry. I just feel I need to clarify when I said monstrosity, because that is a very strong word. Craig's been incredibly successful and done brilliantly in both Skyfall and Casino Royale. The monstrosity has come where he was ended up given too much power, and that he was calling the shots, and the producers were being led there, and the decisions made in the last film have led us down this alleyway. So it's not necessarily a criticism of Craig as Bond; it's a criticism of what's happened. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
I think that's right and very accurate. And I agree very much with John. I often seem to find myself agreeing with John and Matt. But I think there's real truth in it, and I don't think you can have Craig. Regardless of what I think or anyone thinks of Craig, he was a left field choice.
Yeah.
You can't keep doing left field choices, though, can you? That's not something you can keep doing. You've got to return to formula so that you can have a left field choice 20 years down the line or 25 years down the line. And this is where we need producers to have a far bigger vision. Again, it's short-sighted, I think, if they come up with another left field choice, because the more you do that, the identity of Bond just is completely lost. You don't know, and there needs to be, the character of James Bond needs to be reasonably central. And I think well, very central, sorry. And you can't just constantly hover around trying to constantly think outside of the box. And I think in Henry Cavill, you do have someone there that is slap bang in the box, and probably at the time when the franchise has most needed it, in my opinion. Right now, we need light, we need obvious, we need fans to know exactly what they're going to get from Bond, and I think what I want most from the actor, and I think you might get this with Madden. Sorry, I'm certain you get it from Madden and Stevens as well, is for them to be humble enough to put Bond first, for them to respect the character, and for them to realise that they are completely honoured to have that role. And sadly, I don't think Daniel Craig ever had that, actually. Certainly not by the end, but from what I'm hearing in terms of early auditions, he was not especially respectful of the character, I would say. I want someone that loves James Bond and is kind of an everyman. I want him to be star quality, but an everyman in the sense that it has that feeling of, I want to be James Bond. He's an actor who's got to be James Bond, and I can see it. He's got that glow, and he knows how fortunate he is to have this role, and it oozes into the film. And at the same time, so we need that, and I want the actor to be humble, and I think Stevens, Madden, and Cavill would all be humble enough to do that, and I think that's what we need. And I think they'd all manage in the action stakes. I don't want them. If it was Henry Cavill, I don't want muscle. No, don't necessarily want muscle. If I'm being really fussy and picky here, which I shan't be, but I don't want muscle man Cavill. I want to return to someone who's slim, who can glide around and blend in, while also looking very handy and athletic in action set pieces, not just fights, but action set pieces. And in we've done some recent episodes about stunt work with Really 007, which has been fantastic. And one thing that it kind of struck me, I want to have an actor who I think I could be James Bond, because he's a reasonably similar build to your every person. You know, like Roger Moore, Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, George Lazenby. They weren't muscly and big. They were reasonably, just slim, athletic. But then, because they use stunts and stuntmen, it made you feel that that type of physique could do secret agent spy work, and I think that's what audiences need to see. I don't want to see muscles, grit, and this is just a side note. I've only seen posters for Reacher on Amazon, this new series, but I'm just straight away off put by the fact that it's a big, huge, bulky guy that's not going to be slick and careful. I don't know, and that obviously it depends on the story, but I just want someone who's suave and sophisticated, and I think someone who's bursting out of their suit is not right for that. So if we get Cavill, it'd be great for him to reduce to the size of Madden or
Stevens.
What's his name?
Dan Stevens. Yeah.
Dan Stevens. Yeah.
I think as well what you've all said about Cavill. I think Cavill, it's a bit of Nolan. He's been the obvious choice for so long. People are sort of put off, and he signed up like a spy franchise for Apple, and I read that as a "come and get me, please, come and get me."
Argyle.
I want to do something. Yeah, and it's Apple, and John Cena's going to be in it, and I think Guy Ritchie or Matthew Vaughn's involved as well, which is always
sounds amazing.
Is it the backstory to the limousine driver from Die Hard?
You're all right, Argyle.
We've needed that.
And with Cavill, I did see on Twitter recently. He went to, because he's self-confessed nerd. He builds computers in his spare time. He went to Warhammer World.
He did.
I did that as a kid.
Legend.
And he just turned up, and I was like, you know what? How many Hollywood elite would let people know they have a hobby that isn't going out and getting smashed at parties, at clubs?
Yeah.
He's happy to tell people he enjoys playing Warhammer, and there's not something to be sniffed at. And he was there, humble enough, taking photos of every single staff member too, not going around in a hat, face covered up, don't want him to see any of you. He is willing to do all of them. And, you want somebody that, and I think Bond has always struggled with this. You need an ambassador for the series. Now, don't sound harsh. Connery is the face of Bond, but obviously with the amount of fallouts over the decades, all that kind of stuff, never really the ambassador, but Roger Moore was. Brosnan is. And, you know, Dalton doesn't do the media stuff. He doesn't speak about it, which is completely understandable. Same way that Craig doesn't do PR stuff. But if Cavill was Bond, you know, you got a safe pair of hands for your future. You know, he's a safe person outside the industry. He's got absolutely no issues, no dramas, and he's going to pay absolute legacy and respect to that role. And, you know, I would still love him to be cast. I just think it's like Nolan. I don't think we're going to get it, and my heart's ripped because I've seen that man in person. He's a specimen as well. Like, he is James Bond, and he might not ever play him, which is another crying shame. What that's going to do, that's going to pretty much round it up for today. I did have a really random question, but we had so many Q&As. I feel really bad. I feel like I'm interviewing you all. I would have said, is there a Batman that would have made a great Bond? I don't even know if that's worth going on, but I'm actually just going to say Rob Pattinson. He has some weird, maybe because he's a bit of a weirdo in his interviews. We haven't seen him as Batman yet, but he just loves trolling people. He'd make a great spy. And in Tenet, he kind of was a spy and was fantastic in that. But has there been any Batman you'd have loved to have seen as a James Bond? Really random, just to round it off for the night.
Adam West would be amazing in Diamonds Are Forever.
I mean, Bale maybe could have done. I wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been my favorite. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Affleck. I don't. And obviously, when they're American, you know, people are instantly like, no. But you know, there are some if they've got the charisma and presence and everything. Then I don't know. It's tough.
It's tricky.
Yeah, I think you know, if Bale hadn't been Batman, I don't think it's too ridiculous to suggest that he could go there at all. I like that. The discussion of Pattinson's interesting. But for me, George Clooney. Yeah, George Clooney. No,
McGregor syndrome number 2.
Oh no! Listen, guys, it's been 2.5 hours on this, and that's before. That's not including his champ 4. This has been an amazing discussion. It has been fun. It's been really different, and you know what? You've helped carry this through because I've got no idea how to approach this. I said at the start I might have come up with a name by the end of it. I think I have. It's really boring, but it'll have to do. I'm going to call it the cinematic parallels of Bond and Batman. I'm going to say it's done and dusted because what we spoke about is the parallels of these franchises, the characters, the actors, the issues, the positives, all that kind of stuff. This has been a pretty insane discussion, if I'm going to be honest. I've not done one like it before. I'm not even going to try and think of any of the things we could do Bond stuff because we'd want to talk about Bond as well. The Bond stuff's always great to discuss. But I want to hear from everyone at home. Comment your thoughts on Batman and Bond. Is that the crossover you want to happen one day still? Will there be too many multiverses? Will Disney or Warner Brothers buy up the rest of the studios to make it happen? Jeff Bezos could if he really wanted to, let's be honest. So do comment all your thoughts. Please do hit that subscribe button. You know, the main reason this Batman stuff is coming up is that there is a new Batman film coming out. The spoiler discussion is going to be Sunday the 6th of March. I'm held by an NDA to disclose any of the videos. But I will say Monday, the 28th of February at 5 p.m. an NDA expires. That's the most I can say. Don't know if that actually breaks an NDA. I don't know. Warner Bros. When we've got to the end of this video, it's fine. And for everybody else, do find us on social media. It's the best way to find out what videos are coming up, what discussions we're going to be having, who we're going to get on the channel. That is Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. And I kind of want to say as well, this year's the 60th anniversary of James Bond. You guys jumped on so many videos with us last year. It's amazing. There is going to be more Bond stuff across this year. More details I do not know yet. But for everybody at home that for somehow isn't familiar with you, Ray 007, we've got your social going now. You interviewed Robert Davi, who I know License to Kill on your channel is like the fundamental champion. If you were to associate one film with a channel, yours is License to Kill. I'm just going to be blunt. Or like at least Dalton being polite and associating the Bonds to the era. Anything else that you mentioned, the stunt discussions as well. You guys go ahead, plug whatever you want to plug. You deserve it. You've been absolutely amazing tonight.
John?
Yeah, just check out our YouTube channel. We've got some great interviews with people in there. Cast members, directors, stunt people, just been so generous with the time, telling amazing stories of being on set and just giving us an insight into the actual world of Bond. The Robert Darby one, he was an absolute legend, and he's been very, very generous sharing the video as well. There's some great stories, not just about his time on Bond, but actually some of the insights into stuff that he wishes got a bit more critical acclaim and stuff as well, and stuff that is upcoming. So I definitely give that a recommend. You guys, anything else?
Yeah, well, yeah, the recent stunt stuff is really interesting.
Yeah.
We did. I think there are there 4 or 5 episodes with a guy called John Orty from Behind the Stunts. I'd recommend following him, looking at his stuff, going through the Bond films, looking at the different amazing stunts that there are, and then myself, John, and Tom had a great interview with a stuntman called Lee Sheward. There's a video of that on our YouTube channel, and then Tom, John Orty. They spoke with a stuntwoman called Sid Child, who was involved in For Your Eyes Only, and that's another great video. So I'd implore you to check those out.
Definitely.
I definitely back that up. And just for the the Batman fans and that, Lee Sheward that Matt mentioned and John Orty, their knowledge of stunts translates to these superhero films and to these action-packed blockbusters as well. So fascinating in a world outside of Bond as well. Really recommend listening to.
And Lee Sheward was a stuntman on Batman 1989 and The Dark Knight Rises, was he? Yeah.
We are ending this video, but I have realised I forgot to mention Chris Corbold, who's obviously done all the Nolan films.
Oh yeah,
Bonds today.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go into that. That would be his own discussion for his incredible legacy on Bond and Batman. What we're going to do, we're going to put a couple of other things. So obviously it's Oscar season. There's a lot of reviews happening. There's a lot of Oscar films coming out. Some have been out for months, like Don't Look Up. We've got a review coming out this Sunday at the time this video goes up. Not a fan of that film. There's my one review. And starting next week, going to another parallel, one of the best films ever created, ever made. It's the 50th anniversary of The Godfather. There's going to be a discussion review on that starting next week. That's myself and Sim, who is new to the channel. We're going to be doing one Godfather film each week, which I'm looking forward to discussing. Cannot wait for that. And that is just, there's a lot of reviews happening, newer films, older films, and all that other stuff. So once again, I'm going to thank you three for taking time out, for jumping on tonight. It's been amazing to discuss Bond with you once more and bringing Batman into it, a new character we haven't been able to discuss fully at length. So everybody at home, thank you for watching. Subscribe to these guys. Jump on there, watch everything. They're honestly one of the best bunch you can ever have. And we will see you on the next one. Take care. Thank you all for watching.